Hello everyone, if you're new to my channel, consider liking and subscribing. It will make me feel wonderful if you do that. Thanks. By the way, I also have another Naruto and Luffy fanfiction channel. If you are interested, link is in the description.
The Return of Joyboy by TheIntrovertRin. A story in which Luffy is the child of sea. The secrets of Luffy are unveiled slowly, which gives heart attack to people. Member list. Garrick Russell, Warlord. Black Money Young Lion, Warlord. KSG PL4YZ, Warlord. King Nemo, Warlord. Zach Travis, Warlord. Adios.
5 years ago, in the secret base of the Revolutionary Army, Baltigo. Behind the doors of the room, where Kuma was pouring out the burdens and grief within his heart, a small boy, Monkey D. Luffy, was standing still, hearing the choked sobs and wails of pleads and begging from one of his favorite uncles, who has been also a devoted priest of his. Monkey D. Luffy, or rather Nika, felt the sadness and suffering which Kuma was going through firsthand. He had never seen or heard the stoic and yet cheerful man break down like that. Luffy's mind replayed the conversation which he had with his mother a few months back. He had inquired her about the whereabouts of Kuma, who had left the army without even bidding them farewell. He was worried, and his worries came to reality when his dreams filled with Kuma's calls for him, begging him to show a path, a way which can help his daughter. Luffy had been really confused on what was happening and had asked his dad and mother about the situation, only to not get any answers from his mother, while his dad had told him about Kuma's predicament, of him trying to search for doctors throughout the globe in hope of curing the incurable disease which Bonnie had inherited from her mother. Drops of tears fell down Nika's eyes as he held down his sobs in order to hear the whole scenario from Kuma himself. "I wish Nika would at least show me some path to help my daughter." Luffy couldn't hold down the choke which came out of his throat, hearing the broken voice of Kuma begging to him desperately. "Who is there?" a sharp voice asked, making Luffy realize the mistake which he had committed. He wasn't given time to ponder on it, as the door opened to reveal his dad, Eva-chan, and Kuma, seeing him cry pitifully. I'm so sorry, I'm really sorry," Luffy apologized to Kuma, tears streaming down from his face like a river, for not hearing his prayers, for not being there for him when he needed him the most. He apologized to his most devoted priest for not rescuing him and his parents from the celestial dragons who had enslaved them all for their blood. He apologized for not being able to be there when Ginny was kidnapped. He apologized because he knew he couldn't help even Bonnie now, with how weak he was. "It's okay, Luffy." Kuma gently patted his back, as Luffy bawled like a little baby before him. "I'm not angry at you for eavesdropping." Kuma spoke gently, wiping down his tears. "But I can't do anything to help you," Luffy sniffled, telling the heart-wrenching words which he really didn't want to, but he needed to tell Kuma that the god whom he is praying relentlessly, hoping that he will help him save his daughter and liberate her, is powerless and can't do anything for him and his daughter. "It's okay. I am trying to search for a doctor for Bonnie. She will be fine." Kuma himself choked out, his throat feeling heavy with the new onset of tears which were forming in his eyes. "But I bet Bonnie is feeling lonely with me going to the seas to find a doctor for her. How about you help her by keeping her company and playing with her?" Kuma was quick to wipe away his tears and tried to soothe the little kid in his arms. He really didn't like to see the cheery and energetic boy, who is always laughing and making others laugh, bawl his eyes out like this. "Really?" Luffy hiccuped, looking at Kuma, who nodded softly to him. "Really?" Kuma affirmed with his words. "We can even have Ace and Sabo join us. Bonnie would love to play with you guys." Kuma spoke, making Luffy nod slowly and rub his red puffy eyes. "I'll bring her lots of meats." Luffy sniffled, getting out of Kuma's grasps and standing on his own legs. "She will love to have it." Kuma smiled, as he ruffled Luffy's hair with one of his fingers, making Luffy finally give him a weak smile and rush outside to call his brothers and gather meat from the galley. The present time. "What do you mean you started growing pretty stones on your skin and weren't allowed to go out in the sun or the moon?" Nami questioned with wide eyes, hearing about such a condition for the first time. A part of her wondered if Bonnie was spinning stories, but it didn't look like that. "But stones growing up on skin? What the hell is even that? Daddy told me I was sick and if I go out in the sun, then he'll get super sad and I would get ouchies." Bonnie told what she had been told by her daddy. She still remembers the kids in the kingdom calling her vampire because she wasn't allowed to leave the church and go out in the sun. "Daddy even got lots of doctors to check me over for the stupid disease." Bonnie pouted a bit, remembering the doctors, who were sometimes mean to her about the disease and got Daddy angry at them for their words. "But you can get out in the sun now, which means you got treated right?" Vivi questioned, thinking how Bonnie would have felt as a kid when she wasn't allowed to even go out to play with the others or in the sun. This made her realize the true love which Bonnie has for the sun, which she had voiced it out several times. "Yep," Bonnie smiled gleefully, remembering that incident. "A doctor told Daddy that the sickness will leave me when I turn 10, Bonnie chirped, remembering about the times which she excitedly planned with her daddy about the places they would be visiting together. That was a part of her reason to join her daddy in the revolutionary base and train her powers in his Dragon-san's and Eva-chan's guidance. But Luffy Nicken helped to shoo away the sickness before I even hit my 6th birthday. He saved me, that's how I know him. Nami, Vivi, Zoro and Sanji, who had their ears on the conversation, were too confused to say anything. How could Luffy cure a disease which several doctors couldn't, though Zoro wondered if it was due to his powers as a god, which he might have lost while curing Bonnie. But that didn't seem like it, with Luffy telling him that he had lost those powers a long time ago. So, how did Bonnie get cured? Bonnie, how did Luffy do it? Vivi inquired about the question, which everyone had in their minds. I can't say such secrets now. Moreover, I am getting bored. Bonnie whined, remembering the secret which she had promised to keep to her daddy. She wasn't going to tell the scare and awe she had felt that time, even if her heart wanted to tell everyone how Nika Nicken had helped her. She shook her head, remembering the promise, and hopped out of the camel to join her brothers, who were walking on the sand. She wasn't tired and wanted to listen to Nika Nicken's adventure personally. You better tell us later, Bonnie, Nami stated with a pout, which made the youngest girl flash her a smile. 5 years ago in Sorbet Kingdom, South Blue, the Sorbet Kingdom, ruled by King Bekori, was divided into 2 provinces. The southern province, which was excluded from the kingdom's jurisdiction as only the poor and aged peasants lived there, making the northern province the only portion of the island which made up the Sorbet Kingdom. At least this was the case until the freedom fighters, who later came widely known as the Revolutionary Army, overthrew the king, who was forced to flee from the kingdom, but he hadn't given up hope on reclaiming the throne which his brother ruled now. Kuma was leading the ASL trio towards the church where Bonnie was. He was really happy that Bonnie could have some playmates as the trio volunteered to come and play with Bonnie inside the church. He had already informed them of the disease which she has, meaning that they can't take her to any source of natural light. No natural light? Luffy uttered, hearing the explanation which Kuma gave them. It means no sun and no moon for Bonnie. Sabo explained sadly to Luffy in a simpler version. He felt bad for the girl to be trapped inside, and after knowing the reason why Kuma, one of his favorite trainers and uncles, had to leave the Revolutionary Army, he wanted to do something, anything. Luffy, on the other hand, had stopped dead in his tracks. The thought that someone can't feel the warmth and the beautiful cool shine of the moon made him feel extremely sad. But this was not the only reason why his legs stopped all of a sudden. Nika, his mother, was calling him, wanting to have a talk with him. Don't go near the child. Not now. That had him stand on the edge and look back the way they had come. To his mother. He didn't want to hear her, but he knew if she is saying it, then it has to have a bigger reason. Luffy, what happened? We need to move. Don't you want to see Bonnie and play with her? Ace asked, as he tugged on his wrist lightly. Go on ahead. I can't come now. Mama doesn't want me to. Luffy whispered to Ace, who was near him, which led Ace to let go of his wrists in confusion. Moreover, they were just near the church where Bonnie was. When you are done, you can come in. Kuma spoke softly to Luffy, a bit disappointed but fine, as he led Ace and Sabo inside the church to meet Bonnie. Luffy nodded to Kuma as he saw them enter the church. He looked back towards his mother with questions visible on his face. Nika. His mother once again called to him. This time her voice was tinged with sadness. Luffy moved towards the shore to hear what his mother had to say. The child will die if she is exposed to your glow. Nika felt a direct stab to his heart at the explanation which his mother gave him. It was enough for his legs to give out on himself in sadness and guilt that he can't even see the daughter of his priest, who has an unwavering belief and trust in him. I can't help her in any way, Nika whimpered, as he buried his head in his legs, which were pulled up to his chest. The floodgate of tears which he had been holding onto were left open as ugly sobs wretched out from his throat, leading his mother to quickly envelop him in her watery arms and rock him patiently. He was crying because that's all he can do for Kuma and Bonnie now. Cry with their griefs, as he wasn't capable of helping them in any way. I'm so powerless. Nika sniffled, his blurry eyes seeing the figure of his mother and his surroundings. Not a single sea amphibian dared to approach them as Mother Sea took her figure and cradled her baby in her arms, trying to soothe him from the pain which he was experiencing in his heart. She wished for the umpteenth time that her youngest son wouldn't be so attached to the mortals, but who was she trying to pray to, cause she certainly knew her son's ways better than anyone. Sometimes there are things which even your father can't control, my son, Mother Sea whispered to her son, who seemed to be inconsolable, but her words just fell to the deaf ears of Nika, who was mentally beating himself for not helping Kuma, his parents and his daughter now. Oh, only if I had my powers, bah. The sea was quick to shush Nika from even completing the sentence. It wasn't time, and she wouldn't let him have his powers. Not now. Not even in the near future. I know you want to help them, but that's not how you should do it. You're just a child. Mother Sea spoke softly, rocking her baby in her arms gently to calm him down. But I want to do something to help Bonnie. She is also a child, who won't even be able to enjoy the sun or the moon. Nika sniffled, his tears mixing with that of his mother's waters. His heart cried out from realizing that Bonnie might never make it to her teen years even. He really wanted to be there for Kuma, at least this time, but he wasn't even allowed to go near Bonnie, lest he wanted her to die. Nika felt helpless. He felt powerless and useless for failing Kuma time and time again. For the first time, he wished with his entire body and soul to have his powers back, even a tiny bit, which he can use to help them. The child will be able to enjoy the sun and the moon. Mother C finally spoke, not able to see the grief in her son's heart anymore. Her words made Nika look up to her with hope in his chocolatey doe eyes. How? Nika choked out, hastily wiping away the tears from his eyes. Bring the child to me tonight, when the moon is hidden behind the sheets of clouds. Bring the child to me when no one is watching. I'll cure her. The sea spoke, her watery features forming a gentle smile on her ethereal face. She was hesitant to help the child, seeing her having the age fruit powers, but seeing her son cry out for her and her father was enough to make her relent on the whims of her son. You'll do that, Nika sniffled, as he blinked away the tears forcefully. Her mother had always treated only his injuries, except for the time when Ace and Sabo rescued him from Blue Jam's henchmen, Porkami, where she had washed away their pain too. For you, indeed. Mother C answered to her son, hugging him. Now, go, bring that girl. The time seems just perfect. She whispered to her son, leading him to the surface, where the night had already taken control and the moon was hiding behind the clouds. Luffy nodded determinedly as he rushed towards the church, forgetting that his mere glow can expose Bonnie to a threatening position. All that he knew was that he needed to convince Bonnie to come with him. On the other side, a few hours ago, in the church or near the middle of the island, fire had erupted, traveling at a fast rate towards the southern province, wanting to consume anything in their paths. That was the time when Kuma was busy watching Ace and Sabo play with Bonnie, entertaining her with the stories of their training and their silly missions, where they made a joke on the Marines and other pirates, who were way too corrupt to even spare. That was the time when the door of the church was hastily thrown open and several crying old folks of the southern province came in, begging and crying to Kuma. The scene put Ace, Sabo, Bonnie and Kuma on edge, but what they heard next was even more aggravating. You've got to save us, King Bekwari has returned, and he's just as monstrous as ever. It's just like 16 years ago. He still wants to cut loose the country's deadweight. He's going to burn the people in their homes. The last statement from one of the old folks was enough to convey to the people inside the church about the gravity of the situation. The memories of the fire in the Great Terminal erupted in the minds of Ace and Sabo, who were prepared to not let anyone be the prey of fire this time, while Kuma was enraged at the cruel acts of the king. He was torn between saving the southern province from being engulfed due to the fire and going after the king. Luckily, Sabo, who had got better at reading his emotions, proposed a plan. Kuma-san, you can leave the southern province to me and Ace. We will help the people. You can go there. I leave the southern province in your hands then, future chief of staff. Kuma uttered to the 16-year-old, who would soon be the chief of staff of the Revolutionary Army the next year. He even gave Ace a nod, who returned it with determination, and then left straight for the palace of the King Bekwari, to end his cruel deeds once and for all. Bonnie, you can't come out. Okay. Ace spoke to the little girl who looked frightened. We will protect you. Promise. Ace uttered, making the girl nod her head hesitantly. Please take care of her. Sabo, on the other hand, spoke to the old folks and rushed outside the church to rescue any people whom he could find. He would have been concerned about Luffy, if not for Ace to inform him that Luffy was with his mother, which means he is away from the fire and safe. Bonnie was scared of what was happening. She was really happy at the beginning of the evening, when her daddy brought her friends to play with. There was one more friend she was supposed to meet, but that friend had vanished for some important business. Bonnie was okay with it though, as her father was still with her and she got new friends. But now, Bonnie doesn't feel okay at all. She had never seen her daddy so on edge. Her playmates even left her alone with the others, who were bringing in the wounded inside the church. The sight of their burns was scary and made her feel frightened, oaking out of the door, to find her daddy. Bonnie-chan, stay inside. We can't have you get caught in the light. Someone from inside the church warned her, but Bonnie was too distressed and scared to hear them. Is it gonna be okay? Bonnie uttered in worry, looking at the skies which were covered with raging colors of red and the air was filled with the cackling sounds of fire. It looked pretty but at the same time too scary. Do you trust Nika? Bonnie stumbled back, when a kid, who looked a little older than her, spoke, appearing in her sight of vision. I do. Bonnie uttered, showing her belief in the deity which her daddy trusted the most too. She watched as a bright smile stretched on the face of the straw-hatted boy at her words. Was he also a believer of Nika? Bonnie wondered. Then come with me. The boy stretched his hands towards her, his whole body glowing, which she thought looked amazing on him. She would have told him her daddy won't like it if she gets out in the light, or would have told him that her daddy had taught her to not trust strangers, but she didn't. The way her purple eyes locked with the flickering scarlet red eyes made a pool of warmth flood within her. Bonnie extended her hand, willingly, to the boy, whom she was trusting herself to. The boy didn't waste a single second, holding onto her hand and pulling her out of the church where she had been confined to as long as she remembers. She was so captivated by the smile on the boy's face and her feeling the warmth explode within her, she couldn't even feel the excruciating pain which threatened to consume her. It was only when they arrived on the shore and for the first time, she witnessed the ocean, which she had only seen in the books, she came to her senses. "Why are we here?" Bonnie asked, frightened due to the sea, which her daddy had told her not to go near without him when she is cured. But even without the water touching her, she felt way too weak to even breathe and finally collapsed on the sand. "Bonnie, are you okay?" the boy asked, turning to her when she fell on the sand, face first. "What?" Bonnie felt as if she couldn't breathe. She felt her throat was filling with painful stones, which were preventing her from saying something, just like her legs, which felt way too heavy for her to move. Luffy's eyes widened at the sight which he was witnessing. Bonnie's entire arm, which he had been holding to, was covered with blue stones. Even her legs till the thighs were starting to turn into stones. "Mom, help!" Luffy shrieked in panic, making his mother open up wide, creating a clear path of water, which was guiding them to the depths of the ocean. "Who are you?" Bonnie tried to speak, she wanted to know what was happening, seeing the ocean open wide and the boy carrying her in his arms and running towards it. What was happening? Why did the ocean open up? She hadn't heard of it ever happening in any of the books she read. But who is the boy she trusted? Where were they going? She wanted to know but her throat refused to let her speak anymore. She wanted to witness the ocean clearing a path, clearly in awe, but her body refused to obey her. Dude, I'm Nika." Luffy answered Bonnie honestly as he held her to his chest, letting her hear the beats of his drumming heart. "Bonnie will be fine, I promise." Dude da, me. Bonnie tried to call the name of the god, of the boy who stood still and looked at her with tears in his red eyes and with a small smile stretching on his paling face. The ocean was closing up and Bonnie wanted to scream in fear, but at the same time, Nika was here for her. She wouldn't have trusted him for his words, if not for the familiar beats of drums beating in his chest, making her feel home and remember the stories Daddy told her about Nika. Dude da, the ocean finally closed onto the duo, making Bonnie close her eyes shut and stop breathing, but when she couldn't hold it anymore, her eyes opened and her lungs wanted air. She was left in awe when she realized that she can see as well as breathe in the waters. The sight of the cloudy wisps of hair and the brilliant glow which Nika was radiating even inside the ocean, was the last thing she saw before losing herself to the much-needed sleep. The horizon was a canvas of brilliant colors, painted with the fiery hues of red and orange, which was slowly blending into softer shades of pink and coral, before the gradient finally seemed to settle on mesmerizing color of blue for the longest of the evening, before ending in the pitch-black sky adorned by the numerous stars and the moon, which awed the group of travelers with their silvery glow. "There are so many stars in the sky," Chopper uttered with fascination as he laid on the back of the Sandora monitor lizard, which was still carrying the ones who didn't want to walk. "It's cool, right?" Bonnie asked Chopper, as she laid beside him and observed the sky which was adorned with the stars and moon like jewels. She had always wondered how the sky would look with the lack of cloud cover in a desert, and honestly, the sight was leaving her surprised and speechless each time she looked at it. "Back in Drum Island, I could never see so many stars all together." Chopper continued with the conversation. Even though it had already been a week of traveling in the ship, which was sailing through the waters of the Grand Line, he had never once seen the sky look so beautiful with the lack of the presence of clouds to cover its beauty. "Are you guys talking about stars and moons?" Usopp asked as he joined the youngest two in the group, with his voice brimming with excitement. "Let me tell you the legendary story of how Usopp the Star Maker helped the stars to shine so brightly." With that, Usopp captivated Bonnie and Chopper with his long stories, making Luffy, who was listening to it all, with slightly sleepy eyes, smile. He would have joined in the conversation if not for the feeling that they were close to Yuba and the sense of foreboding, which was lingering in the atmosphere. Luffy walked with his brothers, at the front, just beside Vivi, Zoro and Sanji, who were the ones who didn't want to rest anymore and walk. "How much long before we finally reach Yuba, Vivi?" Luffy heard Sanji question Vivi about it. He would have answered him if his attention wasn't on the winds which had suddenly shifted, and the sky which was further turning into inky black at an alarming rate. Even the air was charging with an almost palpable sense of foreboding, making Luffy fasten his steps. "We are just near there, but there's something wrong in Yuba," Vivi uttered, her eyes locked with the light coming from afar which they were nearing. Vivi's eyes widened the moment the sounds of the ominous rumble of the winds, which were growing louder and more intense with each passing second, grew nearer. "Oh no, the entire city is struck by a sandstorm." Vivi squeaked in fear at the sight of the tremendous whirlwind of sandstorm which was raging in the poor city of Yuba. "Damn it, Lou. Why are you so reckless? Don't go running there," Ace shrieked, noticing Luffy running towards it, but his voice got lost in the howling winds which threatened to consume anything in their paths. "Luffy, you idiot!" Sanji was the second one, who clambered out to Luffy, and ran after the idiot who was running to the center of the sandstorm, which can definitely kill him. "We need to get Lou out of there, quick," Sabo shouted in fear of losing his brother, even though he and Ace knew that it wouldn't really affect him that much, but he could still get hurt. Luffy, the ones who saw Luffy run off, shouted in fear as the sandstorm showed its fury. "Damn it, Luffy. What the hell are you thinking now?" Zoro cursed under his breath, as he ran towards the sandstorm with the mind of cutting it, as the reckless idiot of God is probably thinking something and not going to stop now. The group's words concerning Luffy and his well-being were truly commendable, but they were consumed by the furious winds which were raging beyond of the begging winds. Their howls for mercy and forgiveness and the desire for freedom, which was disguised in the veil of anger, reached Luffy the moment the wind had picked up its pace. It had confused him for a moment before he realized what was truly happening. The sandstorms in Aramula had tried to show him or tell him something, which they couldn't convey with their words and consciousness. At that time, he hadn't been able to fully grasp what was happening, but now he was getting to an understanding of what was truly occurring, of how the towns were forced to dry up. The ominous haunting howls and roars, encompassing the mournful shrieks of their pain, was enough to make Luffy understand that they were being abused. That they were being used repeatedly each day, without their own will, or the will of nature and Halid. "I'll not spare you, I'll kick your ass," Luffy shouted out as loud as his voice could allow him, freeing the winds from the control which they were forced into and ceasing the whirlwind of the sandstorm in an instant. The sound of rumbling thunder clapping in the skies above and the calm whistling of the winds thanking for the dire rescue was heard after the sandstorm finally vanished. The sandstorm vanished. Vivi was the first one who pointed it out in shock. The sight of the frightening sandstorm, which had threatened to consume anything and everything in its path, had just vanished. It was as if some otherworldly powers had decided to intervene and put a stop to the destruction and injustice on the dried-up town of Yuba. Thank God, the sandstorm stopped, otherwise the idiot would have been blown off to who knows where. Sanji tutted, lighting a cigarette for himself, to relax his frightened heart which was worried for Luffy. Luffy is safe. Ace sighed at the same time, rubbing his temples seeing Luffy, who was still acting weird but now not in the danger which he seemed to run towards. But what was up with Luffy? Him shouting out to the sandstorm only for it to vanish? "I'm glad that he is," Sabo voiced out next, as he stood beside Ace and witnessed the sight of Luffy still glaring at a far-off distance to the dried-up city of Yuba, which was covered in sand, making it look eerily similar to that of Aramula. He wondered if Luffy knew something which they didn't, as it wasn't far-fetched for Luffy to know something out of thin air. What had gotten into Luffy? Did he eat some weird mushroom or cactus? Usopp questioned out loud, getting out of the lizard which had stopped in its path once the sandstorm showed its fury, and weirdly enough, the very same lizard was crying now. "I don't think so," Bonnie answered with worried eyes as she jumped off from the lizard, her eyes not leaving Luffy, whose fury she can feel from even here. "Luffy, what happened to you?" Nami questioned the straw-hatted teen, who finally turned towards the group to give an answer. "That son of a bitch, no swearing now." Sabo was quick enough to bonk Luffy on the head, while Ace could only facepalm and try to hide himself from the glare which Sabo directed towards him. Both of them knew very well that Luffy had picked up the colorful vocabulary of words from none other than Ace himself. While the others, except Bonnie who was laughing, could only look at Luffy with slightly wide eyes and drop jaws, as Luffy cried out in pain for being hit with a hockey-infused fist. They had never thought that the sweet, innocent, Sunshine Boy can even utter those cursed words. "Vivi, is this what Yuba is supposed to look like?" Nami inquired as she stepped on the sand and looked at the surroundings which had dying palm trees. The sight was enough to make her forget the question which she had just asked to Luffy. Vivi could only clench her fists at Nami's words. This wasn't supposed to be Yuba. This shouldn't have happened to this town even. The Yuba which she had come to know was one of the most prosperous towns which Leader was said to make. So what happened? What curses had befallen here too? Where was the oasis? Was it also swallowed by the sand? "We should start moving. If the rebel army is here in this town, then you got to talk them out of the war," Zoro commented after seeing the quietness Vivi had resigned herself to. It was not the time to wallow in pity. It was the time to take action and stop the war. "The rebel army?" Luffy questioned as he looked towards the group. He had thought that they were heading to Crocodile, not the rebel army, which couldn't be in this town, seeing it having only a handful of people. "Ni-chan? Is this what the towns in a desert are supposed to look like?" Bonnie questioned Sabo, tugging his sleeves. As they walked inside the town, only to find everything hollow and vacant, she was truly confused and sad, seeing two towns in a row now covered with sand and almost on their last legs. The night was even making the town of Yuba look haunted and scarier. Nanohana wasn't that way, was it now, Bonnie? Kuma appeared suddenly from behind, making Bonnie smile wide and jump to her daddy, happy to finally see him. Kuma smiled, hugging his daughter gently. "Kuma-san, where is the rebel army? They were using this town as a base, right? Did you talk to them? Did something happen?" Vivi questioned, approaching Kuma, with a worried expression. She was already on the edge after seeing the town's condition, but seeing the revolutionary's face contort into that of disappointment made her panic. Please, please, let leader be here. They have relocated their base to Katoria, princess. Kuma answered, making everyone's eyes widen up in shock. What? It can't be. Wait, they're gone, they left. The words of shock and denial rang through Vivi, Nami, Usopp and Chopper. We walked this far for nothing? Zoro questioned, gritting his teeth in frustration. He didn't mind the walk through the scorching sand and the boiling temperature, but he did mind that they were wasting the precious time which was required to stop the war from happening. It was not for nothing, Zoro. Luffy stated with a frown, as he looked towards the direction which the sandstorm had come from, and if he was right in thinking that it was Crocodile's fault somehow, considering how the man was the user of the sand fruit, he knew they were walking towards the right direction. After all, that man better be aware that his times of peace and games are going to end soon.
What am I supposed to do now? Vivi panicked, as she began pacing around the place where they were, which was once the oasis of Yuba. Vivi couldn't believe that they had already wasted so much time and the rebel base had shifted to Katoria, which was just near Nanohana. They were so close to it from the beginning, and yet, now, they were too far from it. But why did they relocate their base in the first place?
You just saw the sandstorm now, didn't you? Kuma questioned, seeing the group nod. With that, he started explaining the reason for the relocation of the base, as he had been informed by the man who had been digging up the oasis since the time he had arrived in the town. He would have helped the man in his work, if not for him contacting the other Revolutionary Army agents who were near the town of Katoria. He would have himself teleported there, but someone was needed to inform the group of the situation, and he also wanted to see how Bonnie was holding up. According to the head of this town, Toto, the sandstorm wasn't the first this town had ever had since the drought started 3 years ago. They weren't regular sandstorms. Luffy uttered, getting a nod from Kuma and getting his theory confirmed. He was really getting angry at Crocodile for even doing this. He better regret it all when he beats the crap out of him. Right, and because of that, the oasis is now in that state. Kuma pointed them to the side of Toto, who was probably eavesdropping in the conversation while digging up the oasis. Toto would have shouted at the group for even thinking about the rebels, but having heard from Kuma that they were here to stop the revolution. HS still skeptical about it though. That means the rebels would have realized that they couldn't hold out here any longer, right? Nami theorized, seeing the sand covering the oasis completely. Yes, that's why they relocated their base. The man who was indeed eavesdropping on the conversation started, turning towards the group, making Vivi instantly cover her face with the black scarf which was included in her Arabastion costume. Now, I know that Kuma-san has told me that you guys won't be joining the rebel army, but if you even think about joining those bunch of degenerates, then it won't be good. Toto threatened the group, showing his shovel, which he would definitely use to attack them. I like this man, Vivi. Luffy laughed gleefully, seeing the man willing to stand up to his words, despite his frail body, as he patted Vivi's back. Vivi? Did you just say Vivi? Toto instantly inquired, his shovel falling from his hand, as he tried to get a better look on the girl which the straw-hatted kid was patting to a mere second ago. The blue hair and those brown eyes were eerily familiar. Vivi's not Princess Vivi if that's what you are thinking. Luffy instantly tried to defend his friend by sprouting a lie, only for his lying skills to be so good that even a kid can understand the truth by it. Shut up, idiot! Zoro, Ace and Sanji shouted to Luffy instantly while Sabo facepalmed himself, seeing Luffy basically utter out the information, which he wasn't supposed to, but Sabo was more perplexed by Zoro, Sanji and Ace to do more damage to the situation than it was required. Well, the damage was done, so all they could do now was flee or knock out the man before he decided to do something, which Sabo doubted he would do. Vivi? Princess Vivi? Is that really you? The old man, Toto, questioned, seeing the girl try to deny it, but the voice and the face which got revealed due to it was the last thing the poor man needed to recognize the princess of the country. The girl who is so benevolent to play with the commoners even though she is a princess. I'm so glad to see you're still alive, Toto cried, as tears welled up in his eyes at the sight of the girl whom he had last seen when she was a kid and last heard about when she disappeared. It's me, don't you recognize me? He questioned Vivi, who still looked confused at his sudden shock and surprise. Guess I can't blame you. I did lose quite a bit of weight. Is that you, Toto? Vivi gasped, finally clicking the name which Kuma-san had uttered, to the shriveled up man who stood before her, with tears streaming down from his face. Do you know him, Vivi? Sanji questioned Vivi, who nodded her head in an instant. Vivi, I still believe in the king. He's not the type that could ever betray his country and people. I am right, aren't I? Toto cried out, his hands shaking as they held Vivi's shoulder. He wanted to hear from Vivi that the king was innocent. He wanted to know that the rebels were wrong in thinking that the king would ever betray the people. He wanted Vivi to stop them. Those rebels are all out of their minds. Please, please, you have to stop them. You're the only one who can. Please, stop Koza. He'll definitely listen to his vice captain. Vice captain? Vivi, you're a part of the rebel army? Luffy gasped, getting an instant kick on his head by Sanji for even thinking that the lovely princess was involved in it. No, Koza and I knew each other when we were kids. He was the leader of the Sand group, of which I became the vice captain. Vivi explained to everyone that she had known Koza when she was 5 and he had come to the palace, blaming the king for the drought which his town faced that time. He wasn't there for himself but for the town and the suffering of other people. Vivi still remembers the day when she fought with Koza and lost the first time, but when they fought the next time, she and Koza became friends. That had also resulted in her to join the Sand group and become its vice captain. They had played together a lot, enjoyed and had fun, but then the time which had scared them all had come. A group of bandits wanted to kidnap her, and the Sand group had fought for her, ready to give their lives just for her. Vivi had cried when Koza and others got beat up, but Koza still rescued her until her dad and Igaram rescued them. She had cried later non-stop too, because the others hadn't cared for their lives when they were ready to save her. Vivi knew Koza was the same kid, who grew up in Yuba, and had promised her to make the town prosperous, when her father had left the town in the capable hands of Toto. See ya, Vivi. I hope you grow up to become a great princess. Vivi still remembers those parting words. She still knows deep inside her heart that what Koza was doing was for the country's people, but he was misguided by the plans which Crocodile crafted. I really tried and tried. I swear to God, I tried so hard to stop them. Toto cried when Vivi finished her explanation to the group which she was traveling with. Streams of tears were flowing from his eyes, as he continued to speak. But nothing I said was of any use. Those rebels just won't stop. But their supplies are running low, and they know they can't hold out for much longer. That's why they're planning on settling things once and for all in their next offensive. They've lost their minds. They're practically suicidal at this point. Please, Vivi, Toto's voice shook and cracked, as he practically begged the princess. You have to stop those fools. Toto, please don't worry anymore. Vivi extended her hand to the man who was sitting on the sandy ground and wailing. I'll stop the rebels no matter what, she spoke with a smile, which conveyed her determination to do anything if it meant that she could stop the rebel army. She was ready to sacrifice her own life, if it meant that none of the sides would get any casualty. The group of the pirates and revolutionaries just looked at Vivi, their faces frozen with a small frown, but none of them voiced out the discomfort they felt. Not right now. It wasn't the time to make Vivi understand that she wasn't alone, that she had friends who would help her in her journey. No, it wasn't time to make her remember this once more, because it was Vivi's turn to give hope to the man who really needed it. Thank you, Vivi, Toto sniffled, wiping down the tears and taking the hand. With that done, Toto finally showed the group inns and rooms which they could stay for the night. Well, great job everybody, really, we did some good work. Now, let's all lie down on these comfy beds and get some well-deserved rest. Okay? We need our strength. Usopp took the mantle, seeing Luffy was outside in the cold night. Good night guys. Usopp uttered the words and straight off plopped on the warm, cozy bed which they were offered and slept, only to be hit by a pillow on head. This whole trip you have done nothing but lazing around, Zoro grumbled, him being the one who hit lazy Usopp with the pillow. He was the one who was really tired as he had dared to walk on the sand after taking a rest on the reptile which Luffy had befriended. Why you? Usopp retorted in anger, as he rubbed his head and glared at Zoro. Quit comparing me to you and all the other superhuman freaks. Usopp finished his sentence by throwing a pillow back to Zoro, hitting his face. Now, you are annoying me, Zoro growled, getting a tick mark and throwing a pillow back to Usopp. Only for Usopp to nullify the attack by another pillow and shout out.
I think that Blue Noser wins today's award for laziest talking animal in the desert. Usopp retorted angrily, throwing a pillow to Chopper's face, as he had been the one to not even walk a single step, as he was being carried by Luffy and then had the opportunity to rest on the lizard all the way till here. You jerk. Have you been around in the fur coat in that heat? Chopper retorted back, with slight tears in his eyes, and threw back the pillow, only for it to hit Ace, who had been laughing ATS crew with Sabo at his side, smiling. Oh, you guys are on it. Ace smiled like a devil, making Chopper and Usopp gulp in fear. He quickly got his hands on several pillows and started attacking Chopper, Usopp, and Zoro. This resulted in a fight, where the pillows were thrown hayway. One of Ace's pillows hitting Bonnie, making her join in the childish game, and Chopper's pillow hitting Sanji, who like a pervert was sleeping on the bed which Vivi was about to, and another Zoro's pillow hitting Vivi, whose lips tugged to a smile. Ace, you overgrown child, and what the hell do you think you were doing over there? Hey, who just threw that pillow? You got some guts. Some people are actually trying to get a little shut-eye here. Oh, that's it, you're all UNNNN. This is how a pillow fight among the grown-up children started, each of them forgetting about the worries which were plaguing them and their tired bodies, which demanded rest after the day's hard walk in the desert. The room littered with shouts which was soon followed by the peals of laughter, which was truly needed. Meanwhile, Luffy, who had wanted to sleep even before the group had reached Yuba, didn't want to, anymore. He was sitting on the cold sandy ground under the shiny night sky, silently watching Toto continue to dig for water, which he could feel there. It was getting boring, and he was starting to zone off with each passing second.
His mind was getting overwhelmed by thinking about all the questions which he had for his mother, for the winds and for Halid. He wanted to know the answers to his questions, which none of them were responding to. He was getting tired of getting silence instead of answers. "Are you here for water, kid?" The old man snapped Luffy out of the whirlwind of his emotions and questions which were continuously forming in his heart. "Old Gramps, how are you holding up?" Luffy questioned the man instead, who without a break was digging and digging the sand with the shovel in his frail hands. "The water will come. The Yuba oasis still has life in it," Todo uttered, not answering the question of the straw-hatted kid. He was tired too, but he didn't want to rest. "The dream of Yuba can't be beaten by a bunch of lousy sand. The king left this land in my hands and I will keep it alive. I'll dig up the sand as many times as it takes." The words of Todo made a small smile stretch on Luffy's face. He couldn't help but smile seeing the determination, the conviction and the strength to back up the words in the old man. Despite the gods abandoning the land and not helping it, the people still held on. They still believed in the king and above all, believed in themselves to make a change. "Yosh. Then let's dig." She, Luffy chuckled, getting on to work with a brilliant smile on his previous neutral face. He was getting bored anyways with watching the old man dig up all by himself, and the questions which weren't getting answered were only making him feel lonely. "Hey, would you quit? You're filling up the hole that I spent all this time on," Todo shouted, seeing the kid dig up the sand and throw it in the hole which he was making. He was so frustrated and annoyed by the kid's actions, despite his innocent act, that he didn't even question the kid digging the sand with his hands. "Are you trying to fill up my holes?" "But I am just digging like you old guy." Luffy pouted, seeing the old man get angry. He was only trying to help, and by seeing the amount of sand which he had already dug up, it was far more than the sand which Todo had done after the sandstorm vanished. "No, I am digging holes and you are filling them up. The sand from the hole you are digging is going in the hole that I am digging. In other words, it's not helping," Todo angrily scolded and explained the kid, as he threw his shovel away. He was already tired and the kid pouring sand in all his hard work was making him feel too frustrated, and moreover, the confused look on the kid clearly showed that he didn't understand him. "There's no point in digging if you're also going to fill up the very hole I dug already." With that, Todo left the place angrily, deciding to finally rest to calm down his frustration. While Luffy didn't mind the man's words and continued to dig up until he finally found the bubbling cool water which erupted from the sand. It was enough to make Luffy happy and start digging up more. "Mama." Luffy chanted his mother's name, hoping the eldest deity would answer to him, but it was getting futile the more and more he kept digging and calling her name. "Why aren't you responding to me?" Luffy questioned sadly, as the waters crawled till his legs, not gently caressing him or calming him down like his mother always does. Luffy sucked in his lips, looking at the waters, which was enough to let him curl in. He was tired, he wanted his mother, he needed to get answers to his questions, of all the whys which only she knows, and yet all he was getting in response was silence, which he really wasn't liking. He needed to. When Todo finally returned back to continue his digging work, he found a large hole in the middle of the oasis, which truly amazed him, but on further inspection, he started crying, astonished by the amount of water which the kid had dug up all alone and was curled up and sleeping in, peacefully. "Thank you. Thank you so much." Todo spoke gratefully to the sleeping teen, whom he approached to carry out of the water, where if he stays can get sick due to the cold night and the cool water. Todo tried to lift the kid's body, which almost seemed to refuse to let go of the waters. He tried once again, only for the kid to smuggle his head deeper inside the waters, making him panic, seeing the kid drown in that little water. He tried once again, and this time, finally he was able to let the teen let go of the waters, which he seemed to be inseparable from. "Todo-san, what are you doing so late at night?" a voice uttered, looking at him, or rather the kid, who was weirdly glowing. He blamed it on his tired mind, or chalked it to the moonlight, not believing that the kid can even glow in the first place. "I was just going to take the kid to the room," Todo replied back, seeing the blonde-haired teen softly smiling at the kid and approaching them. "I'll take him. Thanks for looking after my little brother." Sabo spoke, taking Luffy, who was completely drenched in the waters, which he found out in the middle of a desert, from Todo. He wondered if Luffy was already missing his mother. It was no problem. In fact, he found the oasis. Todo smiled, looking at the oasis, which seemed to start filling up the hole slowly. He was really happy, seeing his belief in the oasis not break. He was happy that the sandstorm had not swallowed up the oasis whole. Now, he could just hope that the sandstorm doesn't consume it once again. But if it does, then he'll not give up hope, not ever. Sabo used his scarf to dry Luffy's wet hair as he carried him to the room where the others had already fallen asleep. He would have been one of them, if not for a call that had interrupted his amusement of watching the others engage in the childish battle of pillow fighting. The call was from one of the revolutionary agent who had been monitoring the Baroque Works agents at Spider's Cafe. The information which he received was scant, only including the details of the number of agents present and their basic profiles, but it did reveal that they planned to meet their boss, Crocodile, the following morning in Rainbase. This prompted Sabo to consult with Kuma, only to learn that they had their agents dispersed throughout Alabasta, including Rainbase. Hence, this led him and Kuma to alert one of them about the situation and to gather intelligence on Crocodile's intentions. Crocodile was not in a mood to listen to the yapping and gibbering of the agent who he had specifically picked up and led them here. He was certainly not in the mood of their reaction when he revealed himself as the leader of the criminal organization, Baroque Works. Yeah, government-sanctioned pirate running such things is really strange, as pointed out by Miss Doublefinger. But it isn't money or status or land that he desires. He desires military strength, the power which can bring anyone to fall onto their knees before him. That's what he wants, and that's what his final plan, Operation Utopia, will give him. Military strength. One of the fools asked the simplest and most foolish question, but Crocodile was willing to explain the plan which he had carefully crafted for years and have reached here. You mean something like that really exists on this island and we are going to steal the whole country along with it? Mr. 2 was the first one, who opened his mouth to question the most obvious thing, which he had answered, all the while, trembling with excitement. Oh my, I'm giddy as a little schoolgirl now. Crocodile lit another one of his thick, fat cigars, silently hoping it would last longer than the ones, which he had been inhaling like air. So, these new orders are the final pieces of one giant plan? The one the Baroque Works has been working towards? Mr. 1 asked, coming straight to the point, which Crocodile liked, considering the situation. Crocodile for the first time was thankful for someone having the brains to utter what was truly needed to be said. Yes, that's correct. Every assignment performed as an agent, every mission finished since the Baroque Works was founded has been part of the single operation. Crocodile answered, throwing papers containing a detailed plan of the operation which they are supposed to do, to each of the agents. Inside those letters there, are the final orders that you will receive. The time has finally come for Alabasta Kingdom to disappear. Pardon me, sir, but the papers say it starts tomorrow at 7 a.m., but you told us. Miss Doublefinger spoke, looking at the papers and then at Crocodile. She was still nervous about the warlord being their leader, but she had to question it. Crocodile leaned back on the chair, his confident expression finally falling to a grimace, to hide the fear which was dwelling behind it. There is one more thing we need to discuss. Crocodile flicked his fingers, ordering Robin to bring out the bounty posters of the ones, who, he feared, were currently in the country. Robin swiftly followed the orders, placing the bounties of 3 individuals masked in mystery on the table, them. Mr. 2 gulped, his eyes wide in shock, at the amount of bounty and the attire of the bounty owners. The taunting smirk peeking out from one of them, the deadly stone-cold smile from another and the carefree but feral stretch of smile on the last one, which were all peeking out from the trademark cloaks were enough to inform Bon Curry of the names of the bounty owners without even seeing it. The 3 C's? What do they have to do WI with this? Miss Merry Christmas asked with her eyes wide and more shock on her wrinkled face than the shock which she had when the boss was revealed. She almost looked petrified in fear while her partner couldn't even get a single word out of his mouth. Miss All Sunday, have you, perhaps, made a mistake? Miss Doublefinger tried, looking at Miss All Sunday and then the bounty posters and then at Sir Crocodile, repeatedly. She wanted someone to tell that the bounty posters were not the ones that were originally meant to be shown to them. She wanted Crocodile or Miss All Sunday to deny it. Mr. 1, on the other hand, was silently panicking, but at the same time, he desired to cross his swords with at least one of them, despite knowing that he would be defeated or rather end up dead. The operation was supposed to begin tomorrow morning at 7. Crocodile uttered, his fear carefully hidden behind the mask of his scowl. He would have liked the agents to already start their plans at Nanohana, but he knew that they ought to know about the situation, to be warned and be ready for what can be coming towards them in the form of the 3 C's. But with the presence of the 3 C's in the country, we will begin it tonight. Bebit WYRTH they hear? Mr. 2 questioned out, getting out of his seat. He was starting to get unsure of the whole plan now. With the presence of the 3 C's the plan can crumble to dust, and if somehow, they faced them. No way! Why will they even face them in the first place? That thought was the only thing which was calming the Okama down. Let me play the recorder snail. Crocodile spoke, as he was passed the snail by Robin to him. He wanted to explain the situation to them, but the recording was the best way to show what had truly occurred, considering the agents who were sitting here in this room were the only ones he would need in the future after his Operation Utopia succeeds. Mr. 3, aren't you a little late with your reports? The snail started replaying the words, which were once spoken by an oblivious crocodile. Who is it? A childish voice questioned, soon followed by the munching sound of crackers. The sound was enough to make Mr. 2 stop panicking and listen to it closely, his eyebrows raised as a thoughtful expression settled on his face, which didn't go missing from Crocodile's and Robin's watchful eyes. It's me. Mr. 0. What happened to the Straw Hats and Princess Vivi? Crocodile's earlier words were enough to make Mr. 2 realize that the childish voice was eerily familiar and, Straw Hats, he had surely heard of the name, hasn't he? Crocodile. The childish voice uttered, gleefully, which didn't go amiss by Mr. 2 who was very closely inspecting the voice, racking his brain for the answer which was on his throat but not on his tongue. while the other agents could only hear the conversation go on with confused and shocked expressions. "Who are you?" "It's Syra." All the confusion from the agents turned into gasps of fear. They knew there was a possibility that the child on the other side can be faking it, but they also knew for sure that no child in the Grand Line or any Blues can be that suicidal to either invoke the wrath of Syra, who would definitely find the imposter within a day and finish him, her, or joke with one of the 3C's name with that much confidence. All the criminals in the underworld and the surface knew one thing for sure, that the 3C's were a group who had never shown their faces, but if someone ever dared to impersonate them, they would be killed in the same week, if not for within the night. The agents were even sure that the person behind it all was Syra, which was proved by the trademark maniac smile which appeared on the snail, which had even recorded the facial expressions of Syra, who was on the other line. "What does the 3C's want from me?" "Nothing, cuz I'm coming to kick your ass." Another stream of gasps of fear and shudder rang throughout the silent room, where everyone was listening with their bated breaths. "We can make a deal. I can give you 50% of the wealth from my plan." The agents desperately hoped that Syra would take up on the offer and leave their plan and them alive. But a part of them was already questioning if the plan would even succeed after the exclusive warning they got from Syra of all people. "Not interested, cuz your plan is doomed to fail." The agents, except Mr. 1, were silently wishing that they could have never come here to listen to Mr. 0's plan. They really prayed for it, but now that they knew the final plans of Crocodile, they knew that if they refused to take part in the plan, they were doomed to die in the hands of the warlord, but if they do take it, then they can have the privilege to die in the hands of Red Maniac, Syra. "What do you want then?" "I already told you, I want nothing from you, Crossy." The nickname was the final thing which Mr. 2 needed to realize why the voice felt eerily familiar to him. He had been shocked when the voice had introduced himself as Syra, making him fear and forget about what he had been thinking in the first place. "That's too bad. How about taking half of the credit of my plan?" Mr. 1 was really amazed at the sheer confidence which was leaking from Crocorded voice, but unknown to him that confidence was nothing but fake. "Are you stupid, old man? I want nothing from a bad guy like you. Just prepare to get your ass kicked, goodbye." Mr. 2 couldn't understand why that kid, of all people, would lie and pretend to be Syra. Bon Curry knew one thing though about the kid in the short time where their friendship had bloomed, that the kid sucked at lying. He had seen it when he had tried to lie about the place where they were headed to when he had asked out of the goodness in his heart. So, why did the kid lie? Or was he even lying? Mr. 2 gulped at that thought which made its way to his brain. Was Syra that little kid, Luffy? But that can't be, alright. The recording stopped, and with that the souls of Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas almost left from their bodies. They couldn't even imagine the situation where they had got themselves entrapped in. Both of the options which they were able to see before them led them to one place, which was to the Valley of Death. Miss Doublefinger and Mr. 1 were trying to act all calm and composed, but inside they were a mess of panic. One was trying to find all and any options which she can to get out of the situation, or better, out of the country before either Syra gets her or Crocodile kills her. But she knew that she just needed to hide safely until Crocodile is done for by the hands of Syra, whose bounty and strength is enough to make the warlord kneel before him. Mr. 1, however, was panicking, yet he was looking forward to working with Crocodile because of the confidence which he was showing. "I hope everyone knows the consequence of backing away now," Crocodile warned, sharply glaring at Mr. 4 and Miss Merry Christmas, who immediately wiped away their tears and looked at him, only hoping that the expensive PPP materials which they were next given by Crocodile would work as they were said in their advertisements. Crocodile's eyes next landed on Mr. 2, who had been acting weirdly since the recording started and was pale now, and then on Robin, who had a thoughtful expression on her usually emotionless face. "Mr. 2, mind telling me, what's so important that you felt the need to zone out?" Crocodile finally questioned the Okama. He could question Robin in private, so she was safe for now. "It can't be." Mr. 2 gulped, looking at the snail and then trying to calm his racing heart. Can't be Syra," he uttered, not wanting to accept that the merry-go-lucky little kid, who the crew was truly protective over, was Syra. "But what if?" Mr. 2 shook his head instantly. "It has to be a fluke. Everyone in the Grand Line knows the consequence of playing 3Cs, Mr. 2, Crocodile snapped at the Okama, making the Okama finally blurt out the secret which he was thinking to never utter. "It isn't Syra, cuz that voice clearly belongs to Straw Hat Luffy," Mr. 2 uttered, even before he could realize his mistake. He didn't want to admit that Luffy was Syra or anything along those lines. Robin's eyes widened a little, seeing the reality hidden behind the undeniable eyes of the Okama. Her theory of the kid, Straw Hat Luffy, being Syra solidifying with each passing moment. It was true that she hadn't seen the trademark cloak or the jewel, which they were known for, but the authority, confidence, strength and the smile which the kid carried himself with, was undeniable. It felt almost otherworldly to her when she had been caught before she had even climbed on the ship, her extra eyes having met with that of the kids. "Kuhahahaha, kuhahahaha," Crocodile cackled out loud, Not knowing if he was really relaxed knowing a puny brat was trying to play 3Cs or was scared that Mr. 2 was lying seeing the uncertainty in his eyes. But one thing was sure that he would be making the agents march towards his goal and plan which he had crafted, but carefully. That puny brat. Crocodile laughed further, silencing the tense atmosphere in the room and making the agents look at him. If it's the Straw Hats all the while then no fear, my dear agents. Our plan will go without a hitch. Your only objective shall be to stop Vivi and Koza from meeting each other then. Crocodile knew he wouldn't back his words even if the agents came to him in the afterlife taunting him on it. Cuz Crocodile knew that someone had destroyed the fleet of 80 ships with around 1,800 men in it, including the billions and the millions. He knew that Mr. 6 had, in panic, stated about the Straw Hats and the 3Cs, making him come to a realization which he doesn't want to, yet couldn't help but think about it. But that wasn't required right now, as he saw the color return to every agent's face in the room, except for Mr. 2, who he could see trying his best to deny the fact that he had met Syra in his real form. Each of the agents in the room knew the theory, without any proof to back it. Each of them knew they would be marching to their dooms, but they raised the curtains with their own hands. At the end, when it would be all said and done, it would be them, who would be rotting in a jail cell, if Syra showed them mercy, or in the depths of hell, where they would be forever tortured and haunted. I am so sorry that I don't have more to offer you, Princess Vivi. Toto regretfully apologized to the princess of the country the next morning when she was ready to head out with her friends to stop the rebel army. Toto was apologizing because the town of Yuba wasn't even able to provide the group enough supplies to last for even 2 days. As the chief of the town, appointed by the king himself, Toto was very sorry for the state in which the town was currently in. No, please don't worry about it, Toto. Vivi quickly waved her hands in front of Toto, seeing and hearing the regret and sorrow which was encompassing the wrinkled face and scratchy voice of Toto. He had already given them more than enough to sustain till they got on the ship, to head to Katoria. But now we should be off. Toto nodded his head in understanding to the princess. He really prayed and hoped that his foolish son would at least believe Vivi and put an end to all that he was doing and return back to his old father. So that they can make the town prosperous just like before, now that even the oasis was revived. Oh, Luffy, here. Toto handed a barrel filled with water to the kid, who had dug up the oasis last night, reviving the hope of the town once again. Please, take this with you. Is that water? Usopp was the first one to comment with his jaw dropped, at the sheer amount of water which was inside the barrel. The quantity was enough to last a full day for all of them. Thanks, old guy, Luffy responded, as he hung the barrel from his shoulder, using a strap, happily. He would have felt a little bit sad seeing how the water didn't respond to him like his mother's did, but he was happy seeing the old man smiling happily. So, you did find some, huh? Ace questioned, looking at the old man and then at Luffy. He had a hunch that Luffy was to be credited on the water which he was given, and he was right when Sabo's lips tugged upwards to form a smile. Yes, it was last night. I assume he fell asleep after reaching the moist layer under the dry sand when the oasis of Yuba finally revived. Toto smiled ear to ear happily at the thought of expanding the oasis and reviving the town. He swore to the gods high above that he wasn't going to give up hope, even if thousands of sandstorms came towards Yuba. He won't ever let Yuba be the way it was. That right there is the genuine Yuba water. It's not much compared to what you have done, but that's all I was able to get. Right, then I'll drink it with care. Luffy spoke with all seriousness he could muster before giving a smile to the old guy and heading towards his friends who were waiting for him. He even found Kuma among them, making him wonder if he was gonna join their journey today. Hey, Luffy, be careful with the water, it's way too precious, Usopp commented after seeing him skip on the sand happily, just like his usual way, but there was something akin to confusion which his eyes were reflecting the more they walked on. True to Usopp's thoughts, Luffy was confused, way more than confused, which led him to stop on his tracks once the town of Yuba disappeared in the sandy island. He was too confused on why they were heading towards Mary, when they should be heading towards the place where Crossy was, which he was sure was on the other side and not the side where they were headed to. Luffy looked at his brothers, who also looked slightly discontented at the frown on Ace's lips, and the light tight smile on Sabo's was something to go by with. Luffy's confusion lasted until he overheard the conversation which Vivi was making with Nami, where they talked about going to Katoria and putting an end to the war. The conversation prompted Luffy, who was way up ahead, to halt where he was. Ace, Sabo and Kuma shared a look as the others passed by Luffy, only to stop and look back at Luffy, who was leaning on a palm tree with his arms crossed over his chest. They could feel the discontentment and the disbelief Luffy was feeling and the confusion in the others, when they turned to look at Luffy. Hey Luffy, what are you doing over there? Usopp questioned, seeing the teen come to an abrupt stop and not moving from his place. Luffy's abrupt moods were really confusing him now. Is everything alright, Luffy? Vivi questioned with a confused look as she saw Luffy look at her with furrowed eyes. Where are we doing? Luffy questioned Vivi, slightly narrowing his eyes at her, instead of answering her question. Katoria, to stop the rebels, I don't wanna. Luffy stated with a frown as he looked away from Vivi to the direction he truly wanted to go. "Oh, come on, we don't have time to put up with every little mood that you have, Luffy. Let's go." Usopp tried to persuade Luffy, who was suddenly acting strange just like yesterday, where he wasn't like his bubbly self and now, he was acting way too moody. What was even up with him? "Yeah, shouldn't we get going?" Chopper asked out of confusion, wondering if Luffy had some other plans in his mind. "Ace, Sabo, please, explain to your brother that we need to move. I don't even know how you handle him." Nami grumbled out, not daring to look at the face which Luffy was making, as she knew that she wouldn't be able to speak against it if she saw. But to her surprise, neither Ace nor Sabo moved a step or spoke anything which could make Luffy start walking. Heck, even Zoro was all quiet and looking at Luffy like Ace and Sabo were, as if expecting something from him. "Come on, you dumbass, if you don't get back to that Kotoria place we came by and don't stop the rebellion that's about to begin, then a million Arabastion citizens are gonna start fighting and things are gonna get ugly real quick." Sanji tried to explain the situation to Luffy, but Luffy didn't move an inch or replied to him, making Sanji walk towards him. "We are doing this for Vivi, so let's go." Sanji was about to take Luffy's hands by force, only for his hand to be swatted away by his captain, making him look at Luffy with wide eyes. "What's wrong with you?" he shouted, not understanding Luffy's new mood. "Vivi, right now, all I want to do is kick Crossy's ass." Luffy growled out, his face scrunching up with the suppressed anger before it got hidden by his straw hat. "Maybe we can keep the people away from starting the rebellion, but that won't stop Crossy. Now, will it, Vivi?" Luffy questioned the princess, who was starting to shake with anger at Luffy's words. "Besides, we won't be able to accomplish anything in Kotoria. We are pirates. Everyone knows that things are better off without us around, don't you?" "You gotta admit, he has a way of getting straight to the point when he really wants to," Sanji muttered as he took out a cigarette for himself and lit it. His eyes landed on Ace and Sabo, to see them having stubble proud grins on their faces. Heck, the big bear guy was smiling ear to ear as he was listening to Luffy carefully. "But not too often," Usopp commented from beside Sanji, as he kept looking between Vivi and Luffy, both of them having different beliefs. "No, that's not true," Vivi answered back to Luffy, her fists shaking at her side, as she glared at the teen leaning on the palm tree casually. "We can stop the rebellion. You want to work out in a way that nobody dies in this fight, none of the citizens nor us." Luffy's right eye peeked out of his straw hat, feeling Vivi's naive thoughts and beliefs echo in her brown eyes, while Vivi's fists were clenched so tight that her knuckles were turning white. "We are up against 7 warlords of the sea and a million of people on top of that, and you still want everyone to end up all safe and sound?" Luffy voiced out Vivi's thoughts, with disbelief in his eyes. Luffy knew the harsh reality. He knew that even if his brothers and the army were here to back the kingdom, or even if he used his full powers of Nika, Luffy knew that even as a god he wouldn't be able to secure everyone's safety. Heck, he wouldn't even be able to make sure that his crew doesn't get hurt in the fight which they have to pick up on their own in this civvy. Be so naive to even think that they were going to win this war without any loss? He had thought that the warm-up battle the crew had gone through before entering Arabasta was enough to make Vivi understand that people get hurt, that they are bound to lose and even end up dead in some circumstances. But looking at Vivi, he couldn't see any of that in her actions or thoughts. "You will never win in that way," Luffy spoke out, narrowing his eyes at Vivi. Vivi gritted her teeth in anger at Luffy's words, her whole body raging with her suppressed sadness and anger which were mixing together right now at the words which Luffy was uttering. How could he tell her that? "Come on, Luffy. Can't you try showing Vivi a little sympathy?" Nami pleaded to Luffy, as she tried to approach him, only for Sanji to stop her in the way and shake his head, not allowing her to interrupt the conversation. "And what's wrong with that? What is so wrong with not wanting to see people die or getting hurt?" Vivi inquired as her voice started rising with each word and steps she took towards Luffy. The anger was more visible on Vivi's face when her hood fell down, showing the rage present on her face. "'Cause mortals die," Luffy answered simply with an emotionless face. He had seen all his life that one thing was stagnant and never changing, despite the evolution in technology or in nature. There was one thing which never changed with the passage of time of the universe, and that was death. Mortals die, and that was the cruel reality which was an important part of nature, which even a god can't interfere with. He had even seen it in the Revolutionary Army, when he didn't even have an ounce of his memory back. He had seen it in the forest, where the weakest would die first. It has always been this way, and nothing and no one can change it from happening. Vivi was done with listening to Luffy. She was done hearing that she couldn't do anything. That she can't stop mortals from dying. A part of Vivi thought how cruel it is for Luffy to phrase the life of people with such a simple sentence, as if he was so accustomed to see them die. That's why she slapped Luffy with all her might, the moment those wretched words spilled from his lips, making Luffy fall on the sandy ground with a thud. Vivi could feel the air getting tense and someone starting a fire, but Vivi couldn't keep track of anything in her anger. She wasn't even able to ponder on the fact that she had hit Luffy, who could have easily dodged her slap. "Stop talking like that," I won't listen to it. Vivi breathed heavily, feeling anger course through her veins. Say that again and I'll really hurt you, she warned, looking at the laying figure of Luffy on the sand. That's the whole point of what we are doing here, don't you understand? No one in Alabasta, not the rebel army, the royal army or the people are to blame for this. None of them have done anything wrong. So, why should any of them have to pay for what's happening when every last bit is Crocodile's fault? So, you are saying that it's alright for only you to die? Luffy growled out, reading Vivi's inner thoughts effectively, as he raised from the sandy ground to glare at Vivi. His haki leaking everywhere like red lightning as his anger started to churn violently. He was angry at Crocodile for what he was doing. He was angry at Vivi for not thinking of them as friends and continuing to walk on the path all alone. He was freaking angry that he didn't even notice the loud grumbling of the clouds high above in the skies. Luffy, not your haki. Sabo facepalmed himself, trying to hold onto Ace and Bonnie at the same time, for wanting to hit back at the princess for even hurting their brother. He was also angry, but he had more brain cells than them to understand what Luffy was trying to do. He belatedly noticed all the Straw Hats having gone quiet and looking at Luffy intently. Just being in this country for one day and taking a look around, even I can tell what the country needs, Luffy shouted out, only for Vivi to dash to him and start punching him aggressively. Tell what? Vivi angrily questioned Luffy, as she continued to punch him with all her might, her anger taking control of her. She was lucky enough that Sabo was holding onto Bonnie and Ace while he and Kuma were good enough to control their anger, but neither liked that Luffy was taking hits upon hits, even if they were way too weak, from the angry princess. There could have been another way to tell Vivi the simple thing which Luffy wants to, but no, the rubber idiot wanted to get beaten himself purposely, which is just like Ace. What the country needs more than anything, Luffy shouted to Vivi, feeling her anger increase his. He was tempted to land a hit or two on Vivi to bring her back to her senses, to show her what he was seeing, but he refused to, since he knew that one direct hit from him when he's angry can permanently damage the frail yet determined princess. You think that putting just your life on the line is enough to stop this all from happening? Then what else should I exactly be putting on the line other than that, Luffy? Vivi questioned, her hands trembling and her eyes getting blurry at her own question. I don't have anything else I can put on the line. It's just me, Vivi cried out, not even noticing that her hands had been caught by Luffy. You can at least try putting all of our lives online together. Aren't we friends, Vivi? Luffy questioned, making Vivi finally look at the teen whose eyes flickered to golden red, which held nothing more than the truth, determination and conviction. Streams of tears leaked from her eyes, followed by ugly wretched sobs which racked her whole body as she felt herself enveloped in Luffy's warm hands. Let it all out. Luffy whispered softly to her, as she trembled with the new onset of tears and sobs. He knew Vivi was a good girl and was doing it all for others, even if she was scared, but she didn't need to anymore, because he and the others are here, on whom she can depend on. I know you want to get Crossy the most, but you aren't alone in this. Luffy spoke as he gave a final pat to Vivi, who was quickly enveloped in a hug from Nami. He belatedly noticed Ace, Bonnie and Sanji fuming with anger, but he couldn't understand why. That's why he turned to Vivi once again, wanting to know where the coward of the sand user was hiding. Vivi sniffled, wiping her tears from her hands, to the best of her ability as she looked at Luffy and then the others. She would have asked them if what Luffy told was true, but the intense determination which she saw in their eyes spoke for themselves. I'm sorry, Luffy. Vivi started with addressing the captain of the crew, whom she showed her fury on. She was feeling sorry and embarrassed. You were right, but now I have made up my mind. We are going to find Crocodile now. Vivi made sure to address the whole group. That's how it should have been from the beginning, Luffy cheered as he dusted his clothes happily, only to be enveloped by Ace, who started stretching his cheeks mercilessly with haki. Ow, ow, ow. You could have fucking used some other way to explain that to the princess, you idiot. Ace angrily spoke to Luffy, who was grinning sheepishly despite the slight pain. That's Luffy for ya. Zoro commented from beside Ace with a sigh, silently checking Luffy for any wounds, just like Sabo was doing, which luckily none of them found. Well, getting to Crocodile seems like the quickest way of stopping the fight from happening. Nami gave her own opinions on the new plan which they were supposed to follow. She was happy that finally Luffy was able to make Vivi understand that they were here for her too and she wasn't alone in her mission. And we can quit wandering around the desert too. It was beginning to get old. Usopp tried to confidently state, but in reality he really didn't want to walk anymore pointlessly in the desert. He was way too young for that. So, anyone knows where that crocodile guy is anyway? Sanji questioned out loud to ask Vivi specifically, but seeing her first assumption on the rebel army's location getting flopped or rather outdated, he wondered if she would even know the right location of Crocodile currently. He is in the rain base. Sabo answered, looking towards the north to which Luffy was already excitedly heading to with Ace fretting over him. He wondered how Luffy knew about it, but that could have been a coincidence too at the same time. Knowing Luffy's sense of direction was kinda messed up. Rain base? Where is that? Chopper questioned out in confusion, as he looked at Luffy, who was heading north, and the others, who were silently walking there. It's to the north from Yuba and a day's walk away from here. Vivi provided, after calming down and showing the map to everyone minus Luffy, who was already running somewhere. She just hoped that he wouldn't feel tired with all of this. Will there be water there? Chopper questioned Vivi curiously, making Luffy turn back to the group, who was walking way too slowly. Yes, don't worry, despite the ongoing chaos in the other parts of the country, Rainbase is a vibrant casino town. Katoria, the town where the rebel base is situated, was bustling with a hidden tension, which most of the people of the town were afraid to let show on their faces. The rebel army which had been operating from the town was getting antsy at the news of the deeds of the royal army and their own failures of getting any weapons. Kuza, the leader of the rebel base, was getting frustrated as each day passed by without any confrontation. His patience was already running low and he didn't really need a kid, on top of it, to make things worse. I said no, Kuza repeated for what felt like the umpteenth time. I'm not scared of it, the little kid Kappa was his name shouted out loud, even after Kuza showed him what it meant to be in the front lines with them, via one of his men, Falafra, who had lost his right arm while protecting him. The gruesome wound was really scary to even look at for the kid, but Kuza could see something else which was flickering in those small eyes. My friend who lives in the town beside Aramula is sick right now and I know it won't be long before his town also dries up like Aramula. This is all because he stole our rain, so, I want to fight too. Things like injuries or death isn't going to scare me away. Kuza really wanted to snap right at that moment, but still he kept his voice monotone as he addressed the kid. If that's the reason you want to join us, then go home because we have different opinions. All of us here are scared. None of us want to fight. Kuza uttered the cruel truth which he knew was in everyone's mind. They didn't want a war, they needed a confrontation, the truth. What? Then why the heck are you fighting? That doesn't make any sense, the kid shouted out, making Kuza remember why they even started this. Because the war's already begun. The country wished this upon itself. None of want to fight, but have no choice but to fight. Kuza was really done when even after his explanation, the little kid adamantly stood still, refusing to move. He had thought that the kid would finally listen, but he should have known the truth which he wasn't willing to admit. Beebit, I said go home. This is no place for a kid. Kuza finally shouted out in anger, making the kid finally run off due to the scare. Kuza cradled his temples, refusing to meet the eyes of his subordinates as he made his way inside the tent, which was their little base. What's wrong, Kuza? It ain't like you to go venting your frustrations at a little kid. Someone pointed out to Kuza, who was still rubbing his temples. I just couldn't handle how much he reminded me of my own self when I was a kid. Kuza replied honestly. The eyes of the kids were the same ones as his. In the past and in the present. Guess I haven't changed at all. He murmured to himself, before catching a glimpse of the one who he had assigned to look for weapons. Did you get the weapons? Not much as we'd like to have, as the royal army prevented us from taking their armory. The person answered back with a fake tint of regret to his voice. Kuza tsked at that, not getting the undertone lying within the person's voice. Send a message to all our forces. He started, wanting to finish all of this. He was getting tired of dancing around the bush. As soon as we finish equipping ourselves with weapons, we will announce a full-scale attack on the capital. Meanwhile, in the capital city of Alabasta, Alubarna, the king, Nefertari Cobra, refused to even fight against the rebel army and their forces, who were pointing their weapons at them constantly. He was adamant even when his advisors, Pel, the falcon, and Chaka, the jackal, were against his words and wanted to get back at the rebels for attacking them. But your majesty, if we do not act soon, our kingdom may very well fall. So what if it does? You would use that as an excuse to kill our people? King Cobra questioned his advisors while sitting on his throne. Doing precisely that would be the downfall of the entire kingdom, he uttered, not wanting to lift his weapons against the innocent people who were just agitated because there was no rain in the country. Listen well, Pel, Chaka. The country is its people. Ever since that dance powder incident, there's been a group of people instigating trouble. It's that group we should be fighting against. But the fact remains that we don't even have the faintest idea who this shadow is. Chaka, who is also the current acting commander-in-chief of the Alabasta Royal Guards, spoke out to the king desperately. He didn't want to see his king's downfall, and it'll be too late to act once this shadow envelops the entire kingdom. So, please, your majesty, we need to do something soon. We won't be doing anything to the rebel army. Get that through your head. King Cobra shook his head calmly, not wanting to lift weapons against anyone but the group working for the downfall for the country. He saw his advisors wanting to say something more, but he quickly dismissed them. It was only a matter of time when the rain would once again fall in the country and the group would be caught and the peace would finally return. Your majesty, one of the guards of the royal army came rushing inside the hallways and to him, with frantic eyes, screaming excitement. Karoo has just returned to the palace. A huge smile spread on the king's face, as he quickly dashed to the place where Karoo was currently, after ordering the guard to call Chaka and Pel to the room. He wished to get the whereabouts of his little girl, of where she is and how she is. But when he entered the room, where Karoo was hastily sipping barrel after barrel of water, he only got a letter which left him shocked. King Cobra nursed his temples after reading the letter, not believing what was going on, but he knew it had to be true. Your Majesty, Pell and Chaka entered the room, greeting the king, only to get a letter shoved in their hands to read. It came as quite a shock to me too, King Cobra uttered, as he felt the shocked and surprised expression of his subordinates. I naively thought he was on the same side as the world government and let my guard down, but to think Crocodile would be planning to take over the entire kingdom. And Igaram. Pell's voice shook as he read the letter about Igaram, the original commander-in-chief of the Alabasta Royal Guards, who was dead now. He gave his life for Alabasta. That's just the kind of man he was. Chaka tried to assure Pell, before looking at Karoo, who had also worked too hard for the country and to unravel the mastermind behind the country's doom. It also said in the letter, you fought bravely. Well done, Karoo. Chaka, call all officers for an emergency battle meeting. King Cobra spoke, looking through the window with a determined look on his face. Pell, you are to go ahead and scout the enemy base. The sun was mercilessly shining above the sky, which was devoid of any clouds, sapping the energy of the tight-knit group which were walking through the sandy grounds and the old sandy dunes, parched up on the earth. Despite the help from the camel and the lizard, both of them voluntarily helping the group couldn't escape from the suffocating heat which they were faced with. Where did Kuma-san leave to? Ace questioned as he walked beside Sabo, who had a very thoughtful expression on his face, while wiping down the sweat gathering on his face using his handkerchief. He left for Kotoria a few minutes ago. Sabo answered, thinking about the information Kuma delivered him before leaving them to go for Crocodile. He wasn't told about everything, and even Kuma-san seemed to be at a loss of what was happening, but somehow Crocodile had come to know that the three C's were in the country. This would have really favored the situation in hand, but listening that Crocodile had reeled back from the fear somehow only to march towards the destruction of the country, was also known to them. On top of that, they weren't even aware of the full situation due to some incidents, but all they knew right now was that Crocodile had shifted the beginning of his plan ahead and it would start tonight near Kotoria, seeing that it was the place where the rebel army was. To check on rebel army's activities? Ace raised an eyebrow, seeing Sabo's face. He was thinking something, and Ace could tell that by the deep concentration in his eyes. No, Crocodile has moved his plans ahead, but we don't know the whole situation. Sabo's lips tugged downwards to form a scowl, as he wondered what Crocodile would be planning right now. Was he trying to do something to make the rebel army and royal army clash soon, or was he planning to? No way. Luffy's shout was enough to make Sabo stop in his thoughts and look towards his little brother who was defending the barrel of water from Usopp. I gave you some just an hour ago. They are still going at that? Ace questioned as he looked at Luffy extending his hands, out of reach of Usopp's, who was beginning to cry. Come on. Just one gulp. We finally have some water now, so gimme some. Usopp was whining pathetically, his hands shivering slightly at the sight of an almost full barrel of water. Just one sip was what he was asking. No, this is all the water that the old man gave me. I'm not gonna let you or anyone drink any more from it, Luffy stubbornly declared. He had already refilled their containers of water from the water the old man gave him, so he wasn't going to give any more to anyone. He had already told Usopp to spend it wisely before. It was not his fault that he had gulped down everything in a short while. He needed to learn some self-restraint. I told ya it's too hot, Usopp commented with a whine as he fell back on the lizard's back, which was still carrying them. He was really getting thirsty and didn't want to walk like the other freaky monsters who were continuously walking without even taking a break, except for Bonnie, Nami and Vivi, who were riding on the camel whose name Nami kept, Eyelashes. So you do have some self-restraint, Nami commented offhandedly to Luffy, who poked his tongue at her words. She had thought that Luffy would have given some water to Usopp, as he was always ready to help others, especially the ones who he deems to be hungry or thirsty, even if he doesn't acknowledge it much, if at all. But seeing Luffy not taking too much sips from the barrel himself and not giving any more water to anyone, made her realize that Luffy knew what's a limit, which was a huge relief to her. Keep on moving, guys. We don't have a whole day, Zoro chided Luffy and Usopp, who had stopped to have their little quarrel. You are going in the wrong direction, Bonnie pointed out with a chuckle, seeing Zoro straying from his path. That's no use, Bonnie-chan. That guy has no sense of direction, Sanji commented on Bonnie's remarks, making the pink-haired girl burst into peals of laughter. I can't believe someone has a worse sense of direction than Luffy. Ace spoke at the same time, with Sabo backing him up. I have a sense of direction, both Luffy and Zoro retorted at the same time angrily, making everyone burst into peals of laughter at the duo. Luffy. Vivi called out for the team, when everyone started walking again with smiles on their faces. Vivi got a hum in return from Luffy, making her continue. Thanks. I alone could never make the decision to go to Rainbase. She spoke, looking at the teen with a grateful smile on her face. That's no big deal, Luffy uttered with a smile and a hop to his step. Just feed me. Luffy smiled his signature grin, making Vivi confused at the same time, needing him to elaborate on it. "Once I kick Crocie's ass, feed me until I am full." "Sure, it's a promise," Vivi promised with a large smile on her face, as she saw Luffy skipping off to the lizard, who made a weird squealing sound and their own camel eyelashes making a jealous sound. Luffy would have climbed on eyelashes if not for Purple, the name of the lizard, kept by Luffy, who requested for him first. Moreover, there was more space on Purple, allowing him to lay down and close his eyes. He wanted to listen what the winds were telling him about the country, about its funny tales and how it was before Crocie destroyed it all. He was really enjoying it all, laughing quietly at some snippets and getting angry at what Crocie's done, but then a very strange thought occurred in his mind. "Why am I able to communicate with you guys when Hallett has his will on you?" Luffy communicated with the winds, who strangely went silent at his thoughts. He couldn't help but wonder what they were hiding from him. Heck, his mother was also hiding something and always trying to secretly make him avoid asking her once again. He never showed it bothered him, but in reality it does. What the hell was even going on? Was he always like this? No, he wasn't. In his nightmares filled with flashbacks, never once had he heard the winds communicating with him like they actively do since he was reborn. "Hey, Luffy!" Usopp's voice hit Luffy's ear, making him stop his thoughts and look at the snipper of his crew with a smile. "Wanna play this amazing game with me?" Luffy would have preferred to question the winds, but seeing them not answering, he chose to distract himself voluntarily through the game which Usopp was proposing. On the other side, Bonnie was getting once again pestered by Nami and even Vivi today to continue her stories of childhood, of how Luffy saved or rather cured her from an incurable disease, since she hadn't given them any details about it yet. "Come on, Bonnie, just a little hint of what happened, please," Nami pleaded, wanting to know how Luffy can cure diseases. She knew that he had promised herself to never question about Luffy, but this was too much to keep inside. Even Vivi was eager to know about the details. "Sorry, I can't," Bonnie spoke with a frown. She had promised and she wasn't going to break it so easily. "But I can tell Daddy was extremely happy that he couldn't stop crying and didn't let go of me for a whole month." Bonnie smiled giddily at the memory. "I don't know what happened properly, but Lu Nicken told me that Daddy was scared to lose me. Lu Ni even had to apologize to my daddy several times for taking me without his permission," Bonnie giggled. 5 years ago in Sorbet Kingdom, South Blue, when the fire was finally quenched and the king of the Sorbet Kingdom was defeated along with his palace, Kuma, Ace and Sabo met in the church, only to be informed about the missing Bonnie by the people gathered in the church. They had searched each and every corner of the church to find her, but there wasn't a single trace of the whereabouts of the beloved little girl. "We are terribly sorry. We couldn't even do one single job properly, Kumachi," one of them cried out, with streams of tears leaking from their eyes. Kuma, who heard it, couldn't believe his ears. He couldn't believe that Bonnie had disappeared. He didn't want which the elderly folks were uttering, and hence he started searching each and every place where Bonnie could be. Even Ace and Sabo joined him in his search, trying to find Bonnie, but even at the end of the hour, they couldn't find her anywhere. "The last I saw Bonnie, she was standing near the door 6 hours ago," one of them informed them, when they were inquired about the last sighting of Bonnie. That further crushed Kuma's frail heart, breaking it into pieces as the numerous "what ifs" resounded in his brain, each one more terrible than the last. What if the king's loyal guards had taken his daughter while he was busy fighting with the king? Or what if she had been forced to go out for something and now she can't return back anymore? No, that can't happen. But what if someone had found out about his blood once again, leading someone to think that Bonnie was his biological daughter and hence the world government abducted her to make her? The sooner the thought came in his mind, the faster Kuma sank to his knees, crying out, wailing for his daughter. He had promised to Ginny that as long as he was alive, he wouldn't let anyone harm Bonnie, and yet here he was. He can't even imagine where she was right now or how afraid she would be. If she was even alive till now, exposed to all the natural light. No, she is alive. She is alive. She's not dead. Kuma started chanting repeatedly, not even willing to believe the taunting voice at the back of his mind. Ace and Sabo, who were seeing Kuma break down, felt pathetic, but they haven't given themselves to the agony. They were determined to search for Bonnie, even when Kuma seemed to be too out of it. That is when Ace stretched his haki to his absolute limit, trying to find the little presence of Bonnie. He really hoped that she was in the southern province, otherwise. Ace gasped, his eyes widening in shock at what he found. "Bonnie's with Luffy." Ace gulped, making Kuma and Sabo turn towards him immediately. The others, who also heard it, were confused and worried about the new name which they heard for the first time. "Where are they? Where is my Bonnie?" Kuma questioned, wiping away his tears and getting up on his legs. A renewed hope filled him, as he realized that the Sunshine Boy of the Revolutionary Army was with her daughter, which means that she has to be safe. "What do you mean with Luffy?" Sabo questioned, before Ace could even gather up his words to answer Kuma's simple yet complicated question. "It's what you were thinking." Ace gulped in fear, seeing the fear reflect back in Sabo's eyes. He couldn't believe that Luffy had taken Bonnie to the sea. What was he thinking? "What are you talking about?" Kuma finally snapped, demanding attention and answer. He wanted his daughter. He needed to make sure that she was safe and alive. Yeah, where is Bonnie? Who the hell is Luffy? We want Bonnie back. The people in the church started shouting out loud, making Ace and Sabo back to the corner. They couldn't tell a secret, which wasn't theirs to tell in the first place, to the public. Kuma-san, please, we need to talk in private. Right now, Sabo urged, seeing the angry crowd, who could take weapons any second and chase after them. It wasn't like he and Ace couldn't handle it, but they didn't want to hurt any of them. It was pointless, and the main thing which they should be doing right now is finding out why Luffy did what he did. Seeing the emergency and feeling the seriousness of the situation, Kuma finally relented and calmed down himself and the people gathered in the church, before going after Ace and Sabo, who were running to the shore. He was truly confused seeing it, but a part of his mind hoped that Bonnie wasn't on the shore, where the duo was taking him to. Please Nika, please, keep Bonnie safe. Kuma prayed from the depths of his heart, holding onto the shattered pieces of his heart, which was crying for Bonnie. Can someone tell me what's happening, please? Kuma cried out as the brothers started shouting for Luffy towards the ocean. Please be calm, Kuma-san. Sabo tried his best, knowing his words won't really work on Kuma. He understands what he must be feeling right now, but they needed to be calm right now. They needed to know what's happening and why Luffy took Bonnie in the middle of the ocean of all places, and try to find Bonnie through your haki. The moment Sabo dropped the bomb, Kuma's mind came back to action, activating his observation haki and trying to find his daughter. He searched in the church first, then nearby, and then finally where they were, which made his eyes snap wide open in horror. Bonnie, Kuma shouted, as he dove into the ocean, without even thinking about the consequences. He didn't even care for the fact that he didn't know how to swim or he was a devil fruit user. All that mattered right now was his daughter, whose faint haki signature he could feel from the depths of the ocean. Kuma-san. Ace and Sabo shouted at once, seeing the man splash on the waters, only to go limp and out of energy. The duo brothers dove in, to rescue Kuma and bring him back to the surface, but the moment Kuma was back, he was struggling, but the sea had sapped his energy enough to not be able to fight back in his full strength. I'll go and bring them back. Sabo, hold on to him, Ace shouted to Sabo, who nodded and stayed to hold Kuma down. The man was slowly gaining his strength back, which caused Sabo to try to stop Kuma with words. He knew he couldn't hold Kuma down, not when he was fighting with his whole body and strength. Kuma-san. Luffy is with Bonnie. You need to calm down, please. Sabo tried to reason with Kuma, shouting as loud as he could, above the cries of Kuma for Bonnie. Please, calm down. Luffy is there with her. She's still alive. You can check for her haki, she's okay. Kuma, who was completely drained out of his energy, was feeling helpless. He knew he couldn't do anything right now other than listening to what Sabo told him to do. Kuma, who was completely drained out of his energy, felt helpless. He knew the only thing he could do right now was to listen to what Sabo had said and check his daughter's haki, which was still there, deep in the water with another haki signature which was strong. There were a lot of surprising things which Kuma discovered upon finally calming down his mind, but the most important was somehow the weaker haki, which he knew for sure, was of Bonnie's, was getting stronger with each minute. It was as if, no, maybe, was Bonnie getting better? He didn't even want to delve on the question of how Bonnie and Luffy were still alive in the middle of the ocean, with no air. Nope, he wasn't going to question it as long as Bonnie was fine. Meanwhile, Ace, who had rushed into the waters to retreat Luffy and Bonnie, was immediately flung out of the waters, the moment he tried to dive in. He squeaked, which he would never admit, as he was thrown out of the waters, only to fly straight at Kuma, who with his calm mind was able to use his great reflexes and expertise in observation haki and catch him. A second passed as Sabo and Kuma stared at each other and then at Ace and the sea with shock and confusion, trying to come to terms with what just happened in the waters of South Blue, not in the Paradise or New World. Did the sea literally just throw Ace out? Sabo questioned with a gulp, seeing Ace gasping for air, since all of his breath seemed to have been knocked out of his lungs. It almost felt to Ace that he had been hit by Luffy's rubbery punch to his gut while being unprepared. The sea flung me out. Ace spoke after taking greedy gulps of air, and when realization hit him, she wasn't allowing me to enter. He was trying to stand up on his own when he saw Kuma, who looked fully in control of himself, dash towards the sea. Ace was relieved to see Kuma not dive back into the ocean, as it seemed that he had learned his lesson, but that didn't mean Kuma wasn't worried about what was going on. Sabo, on the other hand, decided to try his luck too, after checking out, only for the sea to not even let him touch her and splash warning waves at his face, drenching his cloth and hair. Sabo was utterly confused. He didn't know what was happening anymore, but he knew one thing. He couldn't stand to watch the lost look in Kuma's eyes. He could tell that Kuma, who was sitting on the sandy floor, was continuously using his haki to feel his daughter. Sabo would have interrupted him, but seeing that it was calming him down, he refrained from it. Ace was wondering what the hell was even happening. The sea had never reacted this way, not even when one of them was being mean with Luffy and teasing him around. So, what changed now? They hadn't done anything to Luffy, which could make the sea hate them. But how long are they going to be down there? Why is the sea acting sentient? Kuma started to mumble to himself, realizing that no one knows the answer to that, except for the sea herself. That's why he eventually started to do the one thing, which he could, and that is to pray for his daughter's safe return from whatever miracle is happening below. He refused to believe that anything other than a miracle was happening down there. Please, please, be okay. Let me have my daughter back. Please, Nika, help keep her safe. Kuma begged, making Ace and Sabo's eyes widen at the mere name which slipped off Kuma's mouth. Nika. Ace and Sabo uttered in unison and got reminded of that night where Garp had told them about Luffy being Nika but also claiming that he doesn't know any more about the name, which dated back to the Void Century. Kuma, what are you doing? Sabo and Ace rushed to Kuma, who was praying to Nika, confusing and further unsettling them. How did Kuma know of that name when even Dragon didn't know about it yet? It was further confusing them. I am praying to Sun God Nika, hoping that he hears my prayers for the safe returns of Bonnie along with Luffy. Kuma explained with a sad yet hopeful smile. Nika, the Sun God? Sabo repeated, feeling questions whelm up in his mind. Wasn't Nika Luffy's other real name, as he had himself said that night, and wasn't he called Nika by his mother all the time? On top of that, seeing Kuma praying to someone with that name was too confusing and surprising. That reminded him that he still needed to tell everyone else in the church that Bonnie has been found and is safe but currently can't be retrieved. Sabo motioned Ace to take care of Kuma and went ahead to the church to explain that everything is fine now. Ace, on the other hand, was utterly flabbergasted to hear Kuma's words. Kuma praying to Nika? To Luffy. Did the name Kuma mentioned and the name the sea called Luffy were related or were the same? And if the latter was the truth, did that mean Luffy is a god? Or is he just named after a god? Damn, this is getting confusing. Ace thought, looking at the ocean, where Luffy was currently. Luffy is Nika though. Ace thought the information out loud, before realizing that he actually vocalized it. But, at the same time, it was done and Ace was too confused hearing Kuma's words, so he continued, so, please tell, why are you begging to him? Kuma felt as if he was drenched with ice-cold seawater the moment Ace uttered the information. His head snapped to look at the teen whose eyes were fixated at the place where Luffy and Bonnie were, and were brimming with confusion. What do you mean by that? What do you mean by, Luffy is Nika? Kuma questioned out loud, feeling himself getting lost in the words which his father had passed on to him. Daddy, what does Nika look like? A child Kuma had asked his father, who was trying to console him after his mother passed away. Well, no one really knows, but it said his body had properties like rubber and he fought however he fancied. Clap, his dad, had told him that time, dancing to the rhythm which he showed Nika comes with. A part of Kuma knew that Luffy's silly rubber abilities were somehow related to Nika, and he had once thought that the kid might have eaten the devil fruit based on Nika, but Ace literally spilling out it. But still, how can be sure? Ace, on the other hand, had frozen, realizing that he just spilled a secret which he shouldn't have, but he guessed it was fine. After all, this was Kuma, a trusted individual and one of the 3 pillars in the Revolutionary Army. He hoped he could tell Kuma about this. But well, it was kinda too late to pretend it never happened anyway. I mean, Luffy is called Nika by his mom, Ace uttered, somewhat awkwardly, hoping that Kuma won't further question him for the details which Gramps or even him don't know about. Kuma went silent for a while, thinking about the possibility of Luffy really being the incarnation of Nika, before another question invaded his mind. Have you ever met Luffy's mom before? He inquired to Ace. Knowing that only Dragon-san, Eva-chan and Ace and Sabo knew the identity of Luffy's mother and by how Luffy sometimes talks about his mother, he knew that she was alive. But this all forced Kuma to wonder what kind of woman Luffy's mom was, to hide her identity and call her son after the sun god, Nika. Was she also someone from a rare race? I have, and so have you, Ace answered the question, nodding his head at that. Actually, most people in the Revolutionary Army have met her. Not that they know that though. I met her? Who is she? Kuma was even more confused than ever now. He knows almost all the members of the Revolutionary Army, including the females, but none look like Luffy, who has obviously not gotten his father's face much. Ace silently pointed at the waters that they were sitting in front of, making Kuma follow Ace's direction, hoping to find a woman in a ship or something like that. But another thought also entered his mind, which he didn't want to believe. Was she already dead? By drowning? Luffy's mother is the sea. Ace finally answered after a small silence. He wasn't willing to look at Kuma right now, lest he starts thinking he is crazy for thinking that, but the expression on Kuma's face was one of shock and surprise, not disbelief. So, what you're saying is that Luffy is the son of the sea, and the sea calls Luffy, Nika? Kuma finally uttered out the thoughts which rampaged in his mind. It was slowly starting to make sense as he looked at the clear, calm, blue sea under the night sky. The sea was really sentient, and that was why she was able to throw Ace out, not wanting anyone to get inside while. Yep, the sea is Luffy's mom. That's why me and Sabo know that Luffy won't be dead in her waters. But Bonnie, we haven't seen this happen till today, but seeing her hockey signature getting stronger, I have a feeling that the sea or maybe Luffy even is healing her. Ace voiced out his thoughts, as he gave a small smile to Kuma. I'm sure they'll return soon. Kuma could only hum in agreement, since he didn't really know what else he could do, being bombarded by the information. He wasn't even sure to believe. He could only sit and pray, worried and anxious as the time passed on. But that was all he and Ace could do right now in the current situation. After a few minutes of their conversation, Sabo finally returned back with Dragon following after him. They were both rushing because they didn't know if Kuma went out of control once again and Ace was able to hold him or not. They were really glad and relieved to find both of them silently looking at the sea, not making a single sound, which was pretty out of character for Ace. The scene was too confusing to Sabo and Dragon as they got closer to the other two and sensed Luffy and Bonnie still underwater with the help of their hakis. Sabo was surprised to find Bonnie's haki stronger than the last time he had sensed. While Dragon would have been confused with the presence of Bonnie underwater with Luffy if not for Sabo explaining him the situation and calling him ASAP and for the feeling that he knew what Luffy was trying to do with the help of his mother. What are you guys doing? Sabo asked, as he took a happy as he was to find Kuma not trying to swim after Bonnie. He was still concerned that something had happened, especially after seeing the slightly guilty face of Ace and the thoughtful look on Kuma's. Dragon-san, is Luffy truly the son of Sea? Kuma decided to finally question the man who had recruited him on the words of Eva-chan. He was truly hoping that Dragon-san, the father of the mysterious boy, would explain everything truthfully. Yes. Dragon answered an affirmative as he looked at the sea and took a seat beside his massive friend. There wasn't anything much to say on that topic as he himself was not aware of the mysteries with which Luffy and the sea was shrouded. Kuma, now, believed from the entirety of his heart and soul, that Luffy is Nika, making him realize why he cried and apologized so many times when he had eavesdropped, which wasn't why he was crying in the first place. He was apologizing for not being able to help Kuma when he had been desperately calling for him. But Kuma understood the young god's situation. He had seen it himself, after all. He was one of the trainers of the young god who had been teaching him haki. How terrible, all that pressure on a child, who shouldn't have to be burdened with it. Kuma and Dragon stayed wide awake, even when Ace and Sabo fell asleep, using Dragon's cloak as a makeshift blanket. The fire and the rescue must have tired them out, but sadly neither Kuma nor Dragon could even take a nap even though they were in need of one. The worries for their children was enough to make all the sleep flee from their minds. They knew that neither Bonnie nor Luffy was going to come out anytime soon, seeing how slowly Bonnie was recovering. The night soon transversed into dawn, with Kuma and Dragon waiting patiently, determined to not move and keep waiting as long as they were required to. Even when Ace and Sabo woke up from their sleep, went to the town and came back with food for everyone, which wasn't anything fancy but simple cheese sandwich, which they were even lucky to get in the island after yesterday's fire. The parents were waiting. So, Sabo decided to speak up, feeling awkward with the silent morning breakfast which they were having. The fire has been completely out now. 12 people died while 67 were injured. We were lucky to have been present at that time, otherwise the fire would have taken much more than just them. I, also, sent some agents to help them with the supplies. Thank you, Sabo, for sorting that out. Dragon replied, taking his eyes off the water after a very long time, to thank Sabo and even Ace for being able to do all this while he was missing. Dragon knew, for sure, Sabo will definitely become a good second-in-command in the upcoming years. After that, the group once again waited and waited. The sun had risen above them, declaring the onset of noon, when suddenly the waters started bubbling, catching the attention of Dragon and Kuma immediately. Both of them hoped it was a sign that their children would be returned now. All of a sudden, they felt the presence of Bonnie and Luffy moving upwards, towards the surface and towards them. That got the parents stand up on their legs, quick, and moved towards the place, only for their children's head bob up into their view, seemingly asleep, making the adults quickly grab onto their respective children and thanking the sea from the depths of their heart. The moment Kuma was done thanking the seas and Luffy for returning and saving Bonnie, he checked Bonnie over, and to his delight, not a single stone could be found where there was previously. Even while standing in broad daylight, Bonnie's skin wasn't turning into stones, making him cry out of sheer happiness seeing his daughter healed and free from the disease which had plagued her life till now. He was so happy to know that Bonnie can now live her life in the presence of the sun, no longer having to hide in the shadows, and he can fulfill his promise to her. Kuma thanked the seas as well as the sleeping god repeatedly, while holding his own sleeping daughter in his hands. It was late at night when the plan of Baroque works finally started with an uproar in the king's palace in Alubarna. Commander Chaka. The king is nowhere to be found, one of the royal guards shouted out in panic, as he ran through the hallways to reach Commander Chaka, who was also searching everywhere he could. We've already searched the royal sleeping quarters, storehouse, balcony, palace grounds, and even the gardens. What? Chaka uttered in shock. It's 1 hour shy of midnight. Where could Majesty have gone at this late hour? He wondered worriedly as it was really uncommon for the king to vanish at this time. Have you checked in his bedroom? We did. But there is no trace of him in the palace nor the capital. The guard answered with fear and anxiety laced in his words. "Keep searching for His Highness." That's all Chaka could command to the guard with the absence of His Majesty and Pell, who is usually the man for these kinds of jobs, but he was currently busy scouting the rain base. "He must be somewhere. I want every inch of the palace grounds and the city combed through once again." "Yes, sir." The guards instantly shouted back and moved to find the king once again. "Where are you at this critical time, Your Highness?" Chaka mumbled to himself as he tried to look at the dark streets, hoping that somehow the king should be safe and sound and somewhere nearby. Cause if something were to happen to the king, then to mobilize the army on his own authority would not be seen kindly. "Sir, we found His Highness." Hope filled Chaka as he was approached by another guard, who was running towards him, with a fear-laden expression on his face. Chaka could only hope that the king was alive by seeing it. "You found him?" Chaka inquired, mentally crossing his fingers for good news, but alas, fate didn't seem to favor it this cruel night. "Why yes, but apparently, the reports say he." At the same time, in the jovial port city of Nanohana, something gruesome was happening, which was sure to go down in history if no one would intervene. The tired civilians of the port town were forced to wake up due to the harsh pounding of drums and the march which the king and his personal army were doing towards the town square. What? What's happening? Slurry and confused voices of people filled the arena, surrounding the king who had traveled all the way from his castle to the port city to make an announcement. There was hope within some people wishing for some jovial news from the king which compelled him to come at this late hour, but some wise men like the elderly and the rebel army's leader had a hunch of what was going on, especially with the king's presence at this late hour. Half of the civilians patiently waited while the other half dreaded for what was about to come. "I've come to make a sincere apology." The words spoken by the king of the island sent chills to everyone present there. They couldn't believe what the king was even trying to say. Please, Your Majesty." Someone dared to try to stop the king with quivering hands and shaking eyes, but was immediately silenced by one of the guards, who instantly pointed their weapons at him. "It was I who stole the rain from my people." In that icy chilly night of the desert, nothing could have made the people feel more colder than the statement uttered by the king. They trusted him, they believed him to be innocent, but is this a joke? Why, Your Highness?" Someone tried to speak with a pale face. "This has to be a joke, otherwise everything would be for nothing." As such, in order to put the sordid dance powder incident behind us, the king continued, as if he couldn't see the pale and horror-filled faces of his own people, as if he couldn't hear them and just needed to utter what he wanted to. "Why, Your Highness? The port of Nanohana shall be destroyed." The king finished with a straight face, not showing any pity or anger, just pure malicious intent hidden behind it. The shocked civilians were consumed by fear at those words. They couldn't believe what they were hearing, wishing it all to be a joke, but when the soldiers started attacking them, it all felt real, compelling them to run, to save their and their children's lives. "Burn down this city, which stands only as a reminder of corrupt injustice." "Yes, sir." The soldiers responded to the orders of their king, going after the innocent civilians, using their weapons and their bodies, trampling with men, women and children alike, without an ounce of mercy. Sounds of hurried footsteps, shrieks of horror, cries of pain, tears of sheer agony and misery resounded throughout the city, conveying the massacre which the town was undergoing. "Usbag of the king, it's all thanks to you, that my town's all dried up." The same kid who had once upon a time tried to enter the rebel army, who went to Kuja to get in and then ran off, was standing bravely before the corrupt king with a hammer in his hands. The kid Kappa was done with everything. If the rebel army won't let him fight with them, then he was going to fight with the king on his own. "It's because of you." The kid shouted out with a war cry as he ran to the king to fight him, but unluckily a kick flung him away from the king, which was from none other than the mighty ruler of the island himself. The people, who were utterly confused at first and later shocked, could only watch in pure horror, the cruelty of the king whom they trusted. Some were not even able to trust their own eyes, rubbing them furiously, wanting whatever they were seeing to be a lie. They had trusted the king. They knew he wasn't like that. He was. The icy cold-hearted look which the king threw at the people, as if he was looking at a pile of disposable garbage, had everyone shut their mouths and focus on escaping with their lives intact from the royal guards and the scorching flames which were hell-bent on taking everyone's lives. "I'll kill you for what you did to my townspeople." Kappa got up angrily, despite his aching wounds. His body trembled with anger as he tried to rush towards the king once again, only for a girl whom he had never seen before stop him with her tight grip. The anger on her face was evident. Kappa was confused why no one was taking a stand. Why were the people running when they could arm themselves and fight back against the injustice which the king was doing on them? Did the people need more evidence to know who had been all along behind every calamity in Alabasta, or? The sounds of trotting of a horse, which Kappa was well aware, had him turning towards the man who arrived in Nanohana with panting breaths and slightly disheveled look. It was as if the man had come in a hurry. "Leader," Kappa called out, with tears in his eyes, to the man who stepped down from the horse, making the man look at him once before directing his anger at the king. The man was none other than the leader of the rebel army, Kuza, who had rushed from Kotoria to Nanohana upon hearing the presence of the king in the port town. He had wished from all his heart when he was coming to the town that the news was fake, but witnessing the carnage and the presence of the mighty king, he had to grit his teeth and face the enemy, but his heart and soul felt betrayed at that moment. "Just what the hell are you doing?" Kuza shouted out with disbelief clear in his eyes as he glared at the king, who stood in the midst of countless shrieks and yells of mercy and pleas, without a bit of guilt on his face. Were the shrieks of fear, the intense heat from the burning houses, the crying kids and women, nothing to him? "I have come to apologize," the king answered with a slight smirk on his face, when it should have been regret or some other fucking emotion. "Shut your damn mouth. This is an insult," Kuza shrieked at the top of his voice at the sheer audacity of the king. He didn't like where the king was going with his words. If this continues, then no one could stop the war which will engulf Alabasta. The sheer anger of the civilians, the innocent trust be too much to stop. The man responsible for using the dance powder and causing the current drought was me. The king spoke with a straight face and a pinky to his ear. He was acting as if everything happening in the town was just a nuisance to him. "I told you to shut up, you son of a bi," Kuja yelled out loud, launching towards the king only to be stopped by the soldiers' spears, which didn't allow him to even touch the king. Kuza knew he wasn't strong, but damn if he wasn't going to shout and knock some sense into the old geezer, who had completely lost his mind. "Do you have any idea at all how the people of the dried up towns felt as they died? They weren't angry nor did they resent you. They all died believing in you to the very end." The feelings of the people and of the country laid bare before the king through Kuza, and yet the king didn't seem to be moved at all. At first, when the drought started and not a single drop of rain fell, Kuza had doubted the king's act, thinking it was his scheme, but his father had always been persistent that the king could never do such acts of villainy. Hell, even the people of Katoria and Nanohana, up to an hour before, never thought of the king as the one who betrayed them all. "It's not the king's fault. The king is a wonderful man." Kuja repeated the words of all the people who had their unwavering trust in the king, hoping that this would make the king take his words back, hoping that the king didn't mean what he said. But he knew it was late. The king had done it. He had destroyed it all. Even if you have to lie, even if you don't insist you are innocent, it would be all fine. But what you are doing right now is defiling the memory of all the men and women who died believing in you. Bang! The king, having enough of Kauza's shouting, just waved his hands to one of the guards, who promptly shot Kuza, missing his heart by mere inches and making the rebel army leader fall to the ground and his comrades who were near him to rush towards their leader to catch him. "Wheelp, I'd call that a wrap." The king nonchalantly spoke with a weird expression on his face, making a Revolutionary Army agent, who was working under the guidelines of Kuma, who was busy stopping a large pirate ship which was about to crash on the port city, note that something unusual was going behind the scenes. The Rev didn't know a lot about the king, but from what info the Revolutionary Army had gathered about the island, it wasn't matching. He needed to hurry up and get to the king to catch him up or Kuma to inform what's going on. But both seemed impossible, as catching the king in the middle of the square meant garnering attention which he was strictly prohibited to, and getting to Kuma while he was busy was also not possible right now. The entire country, even his rebels, we have all wanted nothing more than to hear you say that you're innocent. That's what we've been fighting for all along, Kuza cried out in pain and agony at the king's behavior. Everything was over. Well, Kuza thought that out too early. Watch out. A huge ship is about to crash, someone shouted, making Kuza look at the towering ship with wide eyes. But something was amiss there. The ship wasn't moving from its spot. It looked like someone had successfully stopped the ship from having a crash landing. What's going on? The king, who had all the while being Mr. 2, spoke, turned towards the ship which was supposed to demolish the entire port city, but it looked as if the ship was being pulled back towards the ocean. "Guys," Mr. 2 uttered with a nervous gulp after not getting any answer from his friends, who were disguised as guards. Mr. 2's heartbeat quickened as he looked around himself urgently, finding none of his friends. They were missing. Is it C. Syra? Mr. 2 was almost hyperventilating until he caught sight of Mr. 1 and Miss Doublefinger, who were steadily making their way towards him, with clear panic in their faces. Hell, even Mr. 1, who was always blank-faced, had beads of sweat rolling down from his temples in panic on this chilly night. Mr. 2 wouldn't say he was doing any better though. A part of him was already regretting taking the mission for the first time. Had they really come? Mr. 2 gulped, trying to keep his voice steady but failing to do so. His eyes were wide with fear as he hurriedly changed from the uncomfortable uniform to this Okama costume to gain some confidence. He was feeling terrified as he rushed towards the other frontier agents, not wanting to hear that the 3 Cs were truly here. "We need to hurry." Miss Doublefinger spoke urgently, turning her neck back repeatedly to check if the person who had pulled their ship back to the ocean was following them or not. She and Mr. 1 hadn't been able to see the one had pulled off the feat of stopping the ship as they were too busy escaping with their lives intact. But they knew one thing for sure, that it had to be someone way too powerful and out of their league. Which meant that it could be one of the 3 Cs. "I can't believe it." Mr. 1 stuttered for the first time, feeling a shiver go through his spine at the mere power which he had witnessed firsthand. When he was escaping the ship he could feel a glare on his back as if someone had already found them but let them go to be hunted later. Mr. One didn't know what calamity he had called for himself, but he wasn't going to regret wanting to follow Crocodile. He silently held on the PPP materials which the boss had given to him personally. He just hoped that the advertisements of the company wasn't a fluke and was enough to protect himself. What? The king transformed into a weird crossdresser. The kid, Kappa, who witnessed the entire event voiced out but regretted the next second when the eyes of Mr. One, Miss Doublefinger and Mr. Two landed on him steadily, flickering from fear to shock to anger. Kappa tried to run towards Kuja or someone to tell them what was happening, but it was too late as a slash hit him, making him fall on the ground and bleed out. Kappa tried to move or do something as the imposter and his friends walked away from him in the city. He tried to voice out anything possible but his body disobeyed him. He wanted to stop those cruel people who broke the people's trust and blamed their king, but he couldn't do anything. Until finally some men stumbled upon him by accident. He wanted to tell them what was truly happening, but their voices were getting distant and their faces were getting blurry. He couldn't see or hear anything clearly, until the voice of the one who chased him away from the rebel army approached his ears. It's time to put an end to this country. Kappa wanted to tell the truth. He wanted to tell the leader what's really going on. But black dots swam in his vision and he finally collapsed in the leader's arms. Contact all detachments and tell them to prepare for the final battle. Kuza spoke, picking up the kid with his uninjured arm and walking towards the place where people made a little medical camp. He didn't recognize the men who were working, but all he could do was be grateful and thankful to them when they treated his and the kid's wounds with practiced ease. But Kuja, we don't have enough weapons, one of Kuja's subordinates pointed out worriedly, which strangely relaxed the men who were treating others' injuries. The men were none other than the Revs in disguise, who knew that if the rebel army and the royal army clashed, then only the seas or the gods could stop the country from falling in the hands of Crocodile. Not quite. The huge ship which is now docked onto port is stocked full of weapons and ammo. One of the men in the rebel army pointed out, hiding a sinister look on his face. It's like a sign from the heavens itself. Kuza spoke, as he stood up on his legs, not noticing the glances which the doctors were exchanging among each other. There is a huge misunderstanding here. A calm yet heavy voice spoke, announcing their presence to the rebel army and its leader, who instantly towering figure standing just behind him with a face he had never seen around. Needless to say, Kuza was instantly on alert. Who are you? Kuza asked, taking a step back, and getting surrounded by his own men to form a protective circle. I am just a mere passerby who happened to see what's really happening in this country. Kuma replied with a calm voice. He wasn't going to say that he was a high-ranking Revolutionary Army member when he could clearly see the Baroque work subordinates in the rebel army, who could inform Crocodile about their presence. The warlord knowing about the presence of the three Cs in the country was more than enough. He didn't need to know about their presence now. What do you mean? Kuza asked angrily to the man while still on his guard. The man's whole look and demeanor was making his body feel on edge. It almost felt as if he was standing before someone way too powerful than him. But that wasn't enough to make Kuza not feel angry at what the man spoke. Anyone can see what's truly going on with the country. The king has gone insane and committed his wrongdoings, and now the war is up on the country. He had done that to himself. Leader, let's not waste our time. We need to hurry. Someone from the rebel army tried to persuade Kuza, not wanting to delve into whatever the big, scary man wished to say. It's not the king's fault. He has been framed by none other than the country's false hero, the warlord Crocodile. Kuma seriously informed Kuza, not wanting the man to do what he was intending to. The changes will be irreversible if the war truly breaks down. But as long as he is in this country, he won't let the innocent country fall into the hands of Crocodile. What the? Kuza blurted out with wide eyes, before his eyes reflected rage. He couldn't believe how low the king was willing to fall after his fucking act. Not only did he confess his acts and burnt the city, but now he is using people to put all the blame on the country's hero Crocodile? Don't tell me you are going to believe in that stupid crap, one of the men in the rebel army asked with wide eyes to Kuza, who instantly shook his head. Leave. I have no business with the likes of you. Kuza spoke disdainfully before bolting out of the place with his men to the base. He would have wished to hear the man's words, but everyone in the town witnessed the king's deeds with their own eyes. Meanwhile, Kuma sighed as he let the man depart with his subordinates. He would have loved to contain the man here itself, but seeing the man's thought line, he was clear that it would not be wise to do so. What are we going to do now, Kuma-san? One of the Revs asked Kuma with worry evident in their hardened eyes, as they saw Kuza commanding his own men to gather weapons from the ship and head towards Kotoria. If Kuma guessed it correctly, then the rebel army would leave in half an hour to proceed towards the capital and would evidently reach Alubarna by morning. Plan A has failed. Kuma spoke. He knew it would happen but still felt bad. But well, the situation did help him notice something, and it was only confirmed when three Revs came running to him with the royal guards stripped off their uniform. They had one thing in common, and that was the tattoo on their arms. The symbol. It's Baroque works. Kuma speculated, watching the reaction of the conscious men, who instantly flinched and tried getting away but to no avail. The same symbol was on the arms of some of the rebel army. It's safe to assume that the rebel army also has been infiltrated by the Baroque works. Kuma mused out loud. He was barely speculating things, which were getting checked by the reaction of the Tide agents before him. "What are your orders, Kuma-san?" one of the revs asked, with a knowing smile on their face. Kuma would have personally liked to do something which would render the rebel army to even approach the capital, but he had given his words to Luffy to not interfere with this fight too much, as Crossy was his to fight. And seize. Would he ever go against his kami? No, Kuma would never. So, that left only one option for the revs, otherwise they would be just sitting ducks. Infiltrate the rebel army and vanquish the Baroque work agents from there before they reach the capital. That's ridiculous. Chaka shouted out with disbelief evident in his voice, at the mere information which he got from one of the guards. There's not a chance the king would do such a thing. That report must be a mistake. But the king's been reported missing for exactly the same amount of time. The royal guard argued back with all his strength. "No, I don't believe in this. It's all a lie," Chaka retorted back. He had seen the king just 2 hours back, so it must mean that the king cannot reach Nanohana from Alubarna in just 2 hours. It takes 8 hours for even a carriage driven by camels to reach Nanohana from here. Moreover, they had finally found the true enemy of the kingdom. So why would the king be missing right now, and a fake king because he refused to acknowledge anything else would do something like that in Nanohana? Not only that, but the news of the incident at Nanohana has already spread throughout the kingdom like a wildfire at this ungodly hour. Even the rebels have grown more out of control as they voice their outrage and head towards the capital right now. Many citizens who believed in the king until now have turned their backs on King Cobra and raised arms. The flames of rebellion show no signs of stopping. We don't have the numbers to suppress all the revolts. Please, sir, you must give the order to mobilize the army. We shall gladly follow your every order. Chaka felt overwhelmed with all the absurd turn of events which he was being informed by the royal guards. He was confused on what to do in this situation or who to even believe. What am I even thinking? Chaka berated himself mentally. It was neither time to fall in confusion nor time to not trust on the king. He had seen the king enough to know that it isn't the king's fault. Therefore, if it's come to this, then so be it. Chaka steeled his nerves. We are Alabasta's royal guards. We cannot allow the kingdom to fall just because the king is absent. We shall defend the truth we see with our own eyes. We shall defend this kingdom. Chaka spoke, unsheathing his blade and raising it for the guards to see. They were declaring a war against anyone who didn't believe the king or the ones who were heading towards the capital wanting to seek revenge. All the troops will hereby move out and engage the rebel army. Under the endless stretch of the night sky, twinkling with stars and moon, Sabo sat alone, leaning on a stone, as he watched the celestial bodies in the sky. The others had already souped to sleep, but he was unable to, especially after knowing the gravity of the situation which the kingdom was in. He hated not knowing what Crocodile was planning, but whatever it was nothing good. Moreover, considering the fact that the plan had been moved early and he didn't know how early it was already making him uneasy. What were Crocodile's plans even? What would he be doing to the civilians? Was it related to the rebel army? There were endless questions like those, which were revolving in his head, making him wonder about what can be happening right now. He absent-mindedly picked up the snail which he had kept out, wanting to contact Kuma to see if everything was alright till now. And as if on cue, his Denden Mushi snail began to ring, making him instantly pick up the call, not wanting to disturb others who were sleeping. Sabo waited for the other side to start speaking, not sure if it was truly who he was thinking or someone else. It started. The familiar voice of Kuma spoke, carrying a hint of urgency in it. "What happened, Kuma-san?" Sabo spoke while getting up from the place where he was sitting, prompting Kuma to explain everything which had happened in the port city of Nanohana. Kuma didn't leave a single thing which happened at King, the burning town and the crashing of the ship. The revs hadn't known much of the plans as Crocodile had informed his agents with the help of papers. "How long do we have?" Sabo asked, though he already knew the answer. Sabo had encountered several situations like this and perhaps worse, but never had he felt his heart sinking at the events which had just begun. He glanced at the sleeping figure of Vivi, who would surely cry at the news. He looked at Luffy, who was peacefully sleeping, knowing very well that the moment he gets to know what's happening, he will rage against Crocodile for doing everything he had done. Hell, he was sure that he and Ace would also never forgive the Baroque works and Crocodile for his deeds. The war has started. The rebel army is agitated. You need to move swiftly, Kuma advised, with a sad smile on his face. I have faith in the decision you will make, Chief of Staff. With that, the call finally ended, leaving Sabo motionless for a moment, feeling the weight of responsibility crash land onto his shoulders. They have 8 hours at most before the rebel army evidently reaches Alubarna. Looking at the sleeping figures of everyone, he knew that moving ahead was the only thing they could do, but with their exhausted bodies, the crew and their animal companions, who had trudged through the desert all day carrying several of them, it would be a march towards their doom. Sabo glanced at Luffy, who was curled around Bonnie and Ace for warmth, before walking towards the teen and gently shaking him. "Hey Lu," Sabo whispered, trying to get the teen awake, but it was taking too much time. He would have spoken the magic words, but knowing Bonnie and Ace, they would wake up too. That's why, he picked up the teen from the place between his siblings and brought him to where he was leaning before. "Lu, please get up." Sabo spoke once more, bringing a jerky to his sleeping baby brother's nose and finally getting Luffy up. "Ood." Luffy slurred, making grabby hands towards the jerky. A smile brushed Sabo's lips, seeing the dropping eyes of Luffy look intently at the jerky, before his mouth gobbled it whole. "Lu, how long do we need to get to the rain base?" Sabo questioned the teen gently, making Luffy's eyes blink repeatedly before fluttering open. "Half an hour." Luffy spoke in his slurry voice, before getting up and curling against Sabo. "And from rain base to Alubarna?" Sabo questioned as he pulled up a blanket to cover Luffy from the chilly winds which were rampaging in the desert at the nightly hour. Luffy looked at Sabo with a small frown. His half-awake mind was waking up, wanting to know why Sabo was asking such questions until he felt the emotions coming from Sabo. Urgency, confusion and determination. Something was up, and it was more clear when the winds whom he asked about the time needed to reach rain base to Alubarna informed him of what occurred in the port city of Nanohana. "Usually it takes 8 hours, but if it's urgent then I can do it in an hour myself," Luffy informed Sabo with furrowed eyebrows. Luffy wanted to know how the port got destroyed by those measly agents, but knowing that Kuma was there, he was assured that the innocent civilians would be okay. But he for sure would make Crossy regret whatever he had done. "What about with everyone here?" Sabo questioned Luffy, seeing a vein throb in his forehead out of anger. That was enough to make Sabo realize that Luffy knew what was happening. 3 hours. Luffy answered decisively and took a look at the others who were still sleeping. Everyone was dead tired, and moving right now would not be good for the fight which everyone will be fighting themselves. Luffy would have fought their fights, but knowing the harsh reality of the world, he would never hamper the growth of his friends. He had already fought off most of the Baroque Works agents before even reaching the island, but now he couldn't keep doing that for them. "Alright, get some rest," Sabo instructed softly, processing the information quickly in his mind. "We'll leave early, so sleep now." Sabo should also sleep. Luffy spoke between yawns, as his eyes started dropping once again and his head landed on Sabo's shoulder. "I will." Sabo ruffled Luffy's hair, before taking a last look at the sky and closing his eyes. "We'll make it. The country won't fall. Why are we walking at this ungodly hour?" Usopp whined pathetically as he tried his best to keep his eyes open while walking in the cold sandy grounds and through the chilly winds which were hitting his body, making it feel barely functional. On top of that, he was way too sleepy to walk in the abnormally chilly desert at 4 o'clock in the morning of all things. "At least the sun is not above our head," Chopper commented beside Usopp between his yawns. He was glad that he didn't have to be carried by Purple, the lizard, who was not dealing with the cold too well. "But can someone care to explain why we are starting our journey this early in the morning?" Nami asked, feeling annoyed at getting her sleep time cut off. She was really glad that Eyelashes was carrying her, otherwise she could have sworn that the chilly winds wouldn't let her move well enough to keep up with the others, especially Ace, Sabo, Luffy, Zoro and Sanji, who were walking without any care about the chills. "Because we need to hurry." Luffy provided a small frown to Nami, who insistently found something was going on, which Luffy once again didn't explain nicely to them. She knows that they are going after Crocodile, but if they started their journey a little bit late, then it wouldn't hamper their plans, right? After all, Crocodile didn't seem to leave his base like Vivi had informed. "Hurry for what, Luffy?" Vivi questioned out of curiosity. She wasn't complaining regarding the turn of events, but she was indeed curious about what Luffy and his brothers had planned. Moreover, the mood up in front of them was filled with hidden tension, which she could sense. "Someone needs to get to the capital ASAP." Sabo let a small part of the secret out of the bag. In all honesty, he would have loved to explain the situation to everyone, but knowing Vivi, Usopp, Chopper and Nami, even for a day, he knew that they would panic. He had already told the situation to Ace, Zoro, Sanji and Luffy, who had taken it all calmly and were determined to stop the war, but he couldn't trust the others to do so yet. "Weren't we going to fight Crocodile?" Usopp inquired, although he was truly relieved that he didn't have to meet the warlord who was terrorizing the whole island of Alabasta behind the scenes. But he couldn't help but wonder why they were heading to the capital instead. "Crossy is mine to fight," Luffy declared with his straw hat shadowing over his eyes as he kept on walking towards where the wind was guiding him. He could feel the carnage and the events which were happening near Alubarna and in the whole country. The distrust of the people for their king, the steadily fast steps of the royal army getting ready to apprehend the rebel army who were using horses to reach Alubarna. And the cause of it all, Crocodile, the fucking warlord, who was laughing gleefully in Rainbase. Luffy knew that Crocodile didn't feel safe enough to sleep. "What are we supposed to do, Captain?" Zoro questioned, looking at his team captain, whose unforgiving gaze was hidden by his straw hat. "Zoro," Luffy began, looking at Zoro with the aura of that of a captain and a king. Maybe even something more powerful. I need Zoro to take charge of the crew to Alubarna though Nami is navigating. Luffy ordered, leaving no place for any questions to be asked. Aye, Captain. Zoro responded swiftly even when he wanted to ask how Luffy would come back to them, knowing that his captain's sense of direction was way off. Zoro would have worried if Luffy could take on Crocodile by himself, but having seen the Teen God's powers firsthand, he knew the one who needed mercy was Crocodile. Don't worry, we will be there to take care of him. Ace patted Zoro's back, sensing the worry hidden perfectly in the swordsman's face. Ace was truly proud seeing the worry and care Luffy's crew showered on him. Guys, I see something. Nami bellowed from where she was sitting on the top of the camel, looking at the nearby settlements which were starting to show up through the sands. That must be Rainbase, Vivi proclaimed, as she helped Nami to get down of eyelashes at the same time. In about 5 more minutes, they would be inside the den of Crocodile. That thought was enough to make her feel her resolve shiver for a moment before solidifying. She was here with her friends to take him down. Will the shops be open at this hour? Sanji questioned, looking at the city. Even if they needed to leave for Alubarna, the crew still needed food and water. They needed energy to keep moving, and as the chef of the crew, it was his duty to make sure that everybody was ready for the fight they could be facing. Sabo had informed him and the Moss Head about the main objective of Crocodile's plan to not let Vivi meet Kuza and their part in all of this. Rainbase is a very popular town, which stays open both day and night, so I am sure the shops will be open. Vivi answered Sanji's question with a small smile on her face. Usopp, are you done with that without those pretty poppers? Nami inquired Usopp with a very sweet smile, which in reality screamed evil and sent a shiver down Usopp's spine, who was going to happily run towards the town in search of water. But alas, fate had other plans for him, especially after he had gotten beaten to a pulp by Nami after their battle with the Baroque works in the seas. Yes, I am done with it. Usopp instantly presented the 3 parts of the new climate act to Nami. He was really glad when Nami didn't berate him any further and took her new updated weapon. He wouldn't have got enough time dealing with the weapon, if not for Purple the massive lizard, who carried him and allowed him to keep tinkering with the staff. I wrote a manual for the weapon too. Just read it when you get time. Usopp passed the manual to Nami, who stashed the paper in her pockets. Nami Swan, you don't have to worry about fighting, my dear love, because if you or Vivi Swan don't want to fight then you don't need to, because I will protect you both with my life. Sanji gushed and swooned like a moron towards Nami and Vivi, who instantly got away from his path of noodling. And of course, Bonnie-chan too. Just call me Prince. My ladies, Sanji spoke the last line without flirting. He was serious about protecting the girl who had changed to her adult form and was walking with her brothers. He knows that Bonnie is a girl, not a woman. He swears to never make such a mistake again. Move it, Prince. Zoro taunted Sanji with a straight face. I said only ladies, Sanji retorted back while gritting his teeth. Though everyone present there could tell that the bickering was completely half-hearted and was an attempt to ease the tension of entering into the den of their enemy. Guys, do the Baroque works know that we are in the country? Usopp questioned as he started taking slow steps towards the town, which was just a few footsteps away from them now. He could already hear the hustling crowd of the town and catch some few phrases, but what he couldn't miss for his life was the tension which was enveloped in the town like a ghost's veil. There was something going on and Usopp wished and prayed to the gods for that something to be not related to them. Yes, they do know. Ace informed Usopp, keeping his eyes and ears open for any news from the crowd which seemed to be on their edge. Ace looked at Sabo, who had a small tight smile on his face, indicating that he indeed knew what was wrong. So what did they know? Luffy questioned, cocking his head in confusion. It really didn't matter to him if Croce knew they were coming or not. All that mattered was that the Sand Warlord was going to get his ass kicked by him. Moreover, I have already challenged Croce. Keep it quiet, Zoro. Usopp and Nami hissed at Luffy while Ace and Sabo turned their heads to their baby brother so fast that everyone could hear a pop sound from their necks. You did what? Ace and Sabo questioned Luffy while Bonnie was laughing and the rest of the crew were facepalming themselves at the sheer stupidity of the situation. Your baby B. Nami uttered with a defeated sigh, remembering the day when the crew was personally informed by Luffy about this. Looking at the huge, confident smile on Luffy's face now, she could only hope that Crocodile regrets his decisions. Never change, Luffy, never change. Ace snorted at Luffy's silly actions and grin. Meanwhile, Sabo could finally understand how Crocodile knew about the presence of 3 Cs in the island. It was because Luffy had challenged Crocodile as Syra. Though, it made him wonder if Luffy was going to beat the warlord as Syra or himself. Ace, Sabo. Luffy hopped towards his brothers with a mischievous grin on his face, which almost put everyone on edge, knowing very well that grin meant something troublesome, and it was confirmed when Luffy excitedly continued his words, without a care of the world. Want to deal with the pest in our old style, please? Luffy asked, unknowingly some puppy eyes, which no one could deny. In his defense, Luffy really wanted to go against Croce with his brothers and show the Sand Croce how powerless he really was to even desire to get his hands on that. What do you mean? Usopp questioned Luffy's mysterious words. I am all in for it, Ace grinned without even giving it a single thought. It has been a long time since he had gone out with his brothers as Orange Rat, Cole. Moreover, he would get to increase his bounty via this and also give his crew enough information about where he is. The Straw Hats were utterly confused about the conversation which the brothers were making. The only one who didn't look confused was Bonnie, who was scouting the area for food and water. She already knew what her older brothers were discussing. She would have felt sad knowing she wasn't included in it, but knowing that the warlord and the marines are going to freak out gave her immense pleasure. You guys have those with you? Sabo questioned his brothers in a very low voice, not wanting anyone else to hear what they were talking about. They had already entered the town, but the main town square was still a bit far from where the Baroque work agents would start keeping an eye on them. Yep. Ace and Luffy chimed back enthusiastically while patting their backpacks. Their trademark capes, without which they can't go out as the 3 Cs, were always with them as Luffy never took out the cape out of his backpack while Ace kept the cape always close to him as it's a comfort item for him and helps him remember the good times when he felt homesick. Even Sabo had his cape in his bag because he loves terrorizing the Marines whenever he goes for solo missions. Guys, what are you talking about? Vivi questioned out of confusion and curiosity after hearing the snippets of their mysterious conversation. On top of that, she was getting worried as they were approaching the main town from where the crowd would increase and they needed to seriously plan what to do. It's a secret plan to terrorize Croce. Bonnie answered with a giggle when neither of her brothers answered Vivi or the confused looks of the other Straw Hats, choosing to give a mysterious smile which could only mean mischief. Sorry, but we don't really have any time to play things safe. A short and direct approach might be our best chance right now. Vivi worriedly spoke out her thoughts, not wanting to indulge in whatever the trio were planning right now. Indeed. Sabo answered with a nod as the group finally entered the main town, which was already too crowded with civilians, merchants, gamblers and finally bounty hunters who had bounty posters in their hands. Would you leave that man to us? Sabo suggested, getting a nod from Ace and Luffy and finally a hesitant nod from Vivi. We need to get food and water though. Sanji commented as he took a swig from his cigarette. The chill in the atmosphere was still there but at a tolerable rate. He knew some of the plan which they Sabo, Ace, Luffy, Zoro and him have crafted in the morning, but the new plan or mischief which the trio brothers were looming with was confusing and new to him even. Looking at the moss head, he could see that even he didn't know about the new predicament. I and Bonnie can go get food and water for everyone. Luffy volunteered on behalf of him and Bonnie, who instantly agreed with his plans. Why do I feel that I'm going to regret this? Nami thought, looking at the impossibly happy Bonnie and Luffy running through the crowd to get food and water. Why them? Zoro sighed, leaning on the crumbling wall, behind which the group had chosen to hide from the prying eyes of the bounty hunters for now. He knew that trouble would follow Luffy wherever he goes. Bonnie-chan will keep Luffy in control, Sanji asserted while lighting another cigarette by himself, wanting to stay positive that no Marines or bounty hunters would chase Luffy and Bonnie all the way back here. Yeah, let's hope for that. Anyways, we will see you guys later. We have some business in the town. Ace started after a minute of Luffy's and Bonnie's departure. He pointedly decided to ignore the look which Zoro gave him, questioning about what he was up to, especially when they had offered to help Luffy deal with Croce. You guys can leave us behind if we are too late. See y'all later. Sabo also said his departing words and booked off from the Straw Hat crew, leaving them on their own devices. They needed to change to their capes, which they couldn't in front of the Straw Hats as they didn't want to tell them about their real identities yet. Moreover, they had to even pick up Luffy before he causes any ruckus in the town. Smoker was sitting in a bar, holding a jar filled with booze in one hand and a thick, fat cigar in his mouth. He really needed all the nicotine and alcohol right now, considering the situation which he found himself in. Not only did he manage to successfully lose the Straw Hat Pirates, or more specifically a certain straw-hatted kid, whom he was sure was getting brainwashed by the people around him, and also, Fire Fist, Ace and the revolutionary tyrant, Kuma, to become a pirate and somehow want to kick Crocodile's ass, which was utterly impossible considering the childish, scrawny kid. But there was something wrong with the pirates and Revs wanting to stick with the kid too. Maybe they saw the potential in Luffy and wanted to groom into a weapon for their selfish intentions, which led the kid wanting to be the king of pirates of all things. But that was more of a reason for Smoker to save Luffy from the terrible path which he's currently walking on. Captain Smoker, what are we doing here in Rainbase? Tashigi questioned, eyeing warily at Smoker, knowing very well that the man was pissed off since he couldn't get hold of the adorable straw-hatted kid with an insane amount of bounty on his head. Well, she wasn't going to blame her captain for wanting to get to the kid considering how cute he is, but she wondered if Smoker knew the kid from somewhere. I dunno. Instincts, I suppose. Smoker answered, remembering the little conversation which he had with the kid while he was chasing him so that he could get the boy away from the crazy pirates and the revolutionary. The kid had clearly announced that he was there to beat up Crocodile, which meant that he was going to come to Rain Base, the base where Crocodile is. But why would the kid want to go against a warlord? This was the most confusing question he had. In any case, there is something suspicious going on in this country. Something big. I can feel it in my bones. Catch them. We need to run. Then do you think there's some connection between Crocodile and those criminal organizations? Toshiki questioned, wanting to point towards the Baroque works as well as the renowned criminals 3Cs. From the moment she had arrived in the town, she could sense the tense atmosphere and the whispers of the 3Cs present in the town, which was making her keep her eyes and ears open. Hurry, run after them. Don't let them escape. Ag, run. Maybe. Smoker answered after a moment of thinking about it all. There sure was so much going on in the country, which somehow got that Straw Hat kid involved in it, but what? I still can't understand why the kid is with the Straw Hat Pirates. Straw Hat Luffy. You can't escape from me. The shouts which Smoker was tuning out for a long while couldn't be tuned out anymore. Not when he heard the name of the kid whom he wanted to find. Kid. Smoker dashed outside of the bar with a shout, only to find the bustling crowd of the civilians in Rain Base, parting ways to give way for the straw-hatted kid and the same woman who was madly dashing after the kid in Nanohana, and just behind them was a horde of bounty hunters shouting for the kid to wait and try to attack or capture him. Stop right there. Smoker started chasing after the duo too, who were miraculously running at a top-notch speed while carrying barrels of water and a backpack which looked hastily stashed with lots of food. That gave Smoker a gut-churning thought. Was the Straw Hat Pirates keeping the kid as their captain to make him run errands for them and take their blames? Is it a facade? Smokey. Luffy instantly caught onto the voice which was also chasing after them right now. He had tried his best to avoid making a scene at Rain Base, cause he wanted to terrorize Crocea as Syra and also avoid Smoker whom he had sensed when he was entering the town, but all his hard work had to gone down the drain when a stupid jerk recognized him, followed by bounty hunters chasing after him and Bonnie. The only thing which he was glad of right now was the fact that they were able to stash water and food for the crew. Why the hell is that Smokey guy here? Bonnie shouted out in confusion, seeing the man turn into smoke and chase after them along with the other bounty hunters. The only thing which seemed good about the situation was that the Smoker guy was crushing the bounty hunters on his way towards them. Smokey is way too reckless. Luffy uttered with a giggle, feeling the concern and worry within Smoker for him rise. He would have stopped to answer the questions which the nice marine wanted to ask him, but he didn't want Bonnie to get caught and his friends to chide him right now. It's relentless. Luffy, do you think it was alright trusting them with getting water? Chopper worriedly asked after 10 minutes passed, seeing the direction which Luffy and Bonnie left to. He was getting worried as the time passed, and knowing Luffy, he really didn't want to repeat what happened last time. It's just a little errand. I'm sure that they can handle it. Usopp tried to assure Chopper, but in reality he was freaking out too, seeing the civilians continuously exchanging rumors about a dangerous pirate crew present in Alabasta. He really didn't want to face those pirates on top of a warlord, even if Luffy said that they didn't need to worry about the warlord, but knowing Luffy, his plans have a 99.99% chance to fail. They might just come back with more than just water, if you know what I'm saying, Zoro stated nonchalantly, as he was growing familiar with Luffy's luck of attracting trouble even when he didn't want to. Shitty mosshead, you just jinxed it, Sanji shouted at Zoro, the moment he heard hurried footsteps running towards him and shouts of a familiar marine captain who likes to chase them, and on top of that Luffy's wild giggling and laughter echoing throughout the town and making their way towards them. No, that can't be. Nami shrieked out with wide eyes filled with panic and worry for themselves and the teens who were sprinting towards them, with a horde of marines and bounty hunters on their back. Why the hell are they running this way? Forget that and start running, Zoro shouted out in a hurry to the others, who were still shocked and were either still processing what the hell was happening or were waiting for Luffy and Bonnie to finally catch on to them to get some sense knocked into their heads. Guys, the marines are here, Luffy warned with a huge smile on his face, while also laughing like a freaking idiot, getting chased by marines and bounty hunters. It looked to the Straw Hat Pirates as if Luffy was fucking enjoying getting chased, which he indeed was. Yeah, thanks to you idiots, Zoro and Sanji shouted in unison to Luffy and Bonnie, who weren't understanding the gravity of the situation at all and had successfully managed to gather a horde of men with swords and guns chasing after them. I won't let you escape this time, Luffy, Smoker bellowed out, running as fast as he could towards the kid, who was getting shouted by his crewmates. The more he was seeing the antics of the crew, the more he was getting worried if the crew was truly forcing the innocent kid to stay. Isn't it bad to run around the town like this? We'll be spotted by BW agents, Usopp cried out, running through the crowd of people who were hurriedly trying to get out of their way, but some were still getting caught in the ruckus. You spoke too soon, Usopp, Sanji chided at the long-nosed guy, pointing towards the bounty hunters who were joining with the marines and the rest of the people who were chasing after them. Luffy, what the hell are you doing going around being a pirate? Where the hell are your parents? Do they even know what the hell you were doing? Smoker shouted in irritation, noticing that he would lose the little brat once again in the crowd. Why the hell was there such a large crowd at 5 a.m. in the morning in the first place? Are you stalking Ni-chan? Bonnie gasped, turning to Smoker to give him a nasty look, which told that she didn't like Smoker chasing after her older favorite brother this way. What the? Luffy almost lost his footing at Smokey's question and Bonnie's reaction. Smokey was not stalking him, right? Or was he? Luffy gasped at the sudden realization, but somewhere a sane part of him knew that it wasn't the case, so he left his realization in the dumpster and ran ahead. Those fucking Marines. Why the hell do they keep chasing Luffy? Zoro commented angrily, wanting to face off the Marine, especially considering the weird way of how Smoker always found Luffy in strange situations. Roronoa Zoro. Stop right there. Zoro turned tail and began running as fast as he could. He did not want to face the rip-off of Kuina. All the thoughts of confronting Smoker for the sake of Luffy vanished Zoro when he heard that voice. No way in hell was he going to stop for the woman. Like hell I'm gonna stop, you rip-off, Zoro yelled back, eliciting a peal of laughter from Luffy and a string of curses from Sanji, who wanted to kick him for disrespecting a woman, but damn him. How dare you disrespect a woman, you MOSSHEAD? Sanji spun to kick Zoro's head, but Luffy was instantly between them, stopping their fight. It's not time for this, Zoro, Sanji. Luffy caught Sanji's leg and Zoro's hand, before they could either kick Zoro's face or the katana left their hilts. The Marines and bounty hunters were still hot on their tails, and he didn't want them to ruin the plan which he thought out with his brothers. Moreover, the ruckus which they have created must have already gotten Crossy's attention. Catch these. Luffy threw the barrels of water to Zoro and Sanji, as he didn't have enough hands to drag both of them at the same time while carrying the barrels of water. Vivi, where is Crossy? Luffy questioned, his face contorting into that of a serious expression. He was done playing around and needed to find Crossy's location unless he wanted to kick Crossy out of his base, which seemed fun. He's in that building with the crocodile on top. Vivi pointed at the yellow pyramid-type building to Luffy. That's Rain Dinners, the casino owned by Crocodile. Luffy nodded and headed towards the place after glancing over his shoulder to look at his nakama. Nami was doing okayish but was searching safe escape routes. Zoro's eyes were too sharp looking for anyone threatening. Sanji was close to Vivi and Bonnie, keeping them safe. Usopp was panicking a bit but was doing okay, like Chopper, who was running too. Okay then. Luffy yelped, OICE, getting cut off mid-sentence and his feet getting yanked off his ground and into the air. He would have punched the person who dared to kidnap him, but sensing the familiar faint haki of his brothers, Luffy relaxed in their holds, but the same could not be said about the others. Don't worry about me. Go ahead. That was the last words which Luffy could utter to his worried crew, before he disappeared with his brothers. Nobody had been able to see the two figures in the dark, donned with capes covering their faces, moving through the rooftops to swoop Luffy with incredible speed and precision. Luffy? What the hell? Where did he go? The Straw Hat Pirates and the Marines along with the bounty hunters gasped, screamed and shrieked, completely shocked at what was going on, until someone with rapt attention recognized the iconic orange and blue capes rustling through the wind of the two kidnappers, who were also wearing the extravagant jewels which were hanging from their neck. Realization dawned on that man like cold icy water as he yelled out in shock and fear. It's Orange Wrath, Cole, and Blue Sly, Cyan. The person shouted out, regretting the next moment when shrieks and screams of fear resounded throughout the town, spreading panic like a wildfire. The fuck? They were the 3 Cs? They fucking actually exist? Marines and the bounty hunters let out in fear. Some even ran with their tail between their legs. The rumors which they had been hearing about the presence of the 3 Cs was considered fake, which had given the bounty hunters enough guts to face the Straw Hat Pirates and not leave the fucking island. But now, they were not sure. All they knew was if they don't want to be killed or be traumatized forever, they needed to run, leave and never show their faces in this island, lest the 3 Cs come after them. Those bastards. Zoro gritted his teeth, his eyes wide with shock, but the shock resided soon with the worry of Luffy, and he unsheathed all his katana from their hilts and ran after those motherfucking ghosts of the past, which he had just thought was a myth to keep the greedy bounty hunters and the Marines away from pirates, but those fuckers were not just a myth but a reality. Zoro was feeling his blood run cold when the realization of the 3 Cs having kidnapped Luffy, a god, dawned on him. The moment Zoro started running, Sanji wasn't too far behind. He was frightened at the possibility of what would happen to their captain, who is a beacon of sunshine to everyone. Captain, damn it. Give him back, Sanji shouted out, snapping his cigarette in half and running towards the place where Cole and Cyan disappeared too. He was alarmed from the moment he had heard someone mentioning the presence of Syra in the crowd, but he had never thought that it was true, because people talk shit. He had heard pirates and Marines alike talking about 3 Cs in the Bharati, about how brutal they were. There was no way he was going to leave his captain despite how reckless, stupid, dumb he is in their hands. And no, it can't be. Nami's voice trembled with fear and her face turned pale and contorted into that of sheer horror at what she heard and saw. Luffy. Nami felt like collapsing out of pure terror, which made her legs feel jelly-like. She had heard of the 3 Cs during her travels even in the East Blue and even from Arlong, who was seemingly afraid of the legendary pirates. Their fearsome stories had always scared Nami, especially after hearing that the crew would disappear like a ghost in the wide oceans after utterly crushing the pirates or the marines they would encounter. Usopp, Vivi and Chopper were completely frozen in their place, their eyes wide with fear and legs unable to carry them. They had heard snippets about the terrific tales and adventures of the Three Seas, spewing chaos wherever they went. Their knees almost buckled under as they remembered the advertisements in the newspapers regarding impenetrable items which even Three Seas can't break or steal, made by the Three Ps or originally known as PPP, but they had never known what it truly was until a few minutes back where Luffy, the guy who could fight a war all by himself, got freaking kidnapped by them. The Marines and the bounty hunters were in utter chaos, trying to run away and escape from the wrath of the Three Seas, except for Smoker, who was running after the Three Seas, the moment they snatched the kid, whom he was determined to save from the terrible pirate life. But now, the situation had escalated to far worse than the kid being a pirate. This isn't good at all. Smoker cursed under his breath, his fists clenching and body turning to smoke to cover the distance as fast as he could to find the innocent kid. Because he knew once those wretched criminals have Luffy, it was game over for the kid. But Smoker wasn't going to give up on the kid, even if he can't compete with the Three Seas. A protective instinct which he hadn't realized within him surged above seeing Luffy in the clutches of the Three Seas. I have to get Luffy back. Zoro and Sanji exchanged brief glances, both of them shocked that Smoker of all people was willing to help them get Luffy back, but the shock was shoved under the rug as they were determined to get Luffy back, no matter what. With Smoker, Zoro and Sanji leading the charge and madly dashing towards their deaths in the hands of the Three Seas, the Straw Hat Pirates couldn't stay still shocked. Even if they were scared and confused, worried and terrified for their captain, they stood up and followed after Zoro and Sanji, replacing their fear with determination, which was fueled with the bright sounds of laughter which they could hear resound in their minds. They couldn't let their captain be taken, not like this.